Hi everyone, I'm Olivia Thompson. I'm a 28-year-old graphic designer, and up until recently, I thought I had it all. I had a cozy home in the suburbs, a handsome husband named Ethan, and a picture-perfect life. At least, that's how it looked on the outside. Ethan and I had been married for 3 years, and I really believed we were living the dream. But you know how people say love is blind? That was me. I was so caught up in the idea of our perfect life that I didn't notice the cracks starting to show. Olivia, did you reorganize my desk again? Ethan would ask, sounding a little irritated. I just thought it would help you find things easier, I'd reply, trying to keep things peaceful. I had a system. Don't touch my stuff without asking next time, he'd snap. It started with small things like that, little comments here and there. Ethan always wanted to know where I was or who I was talking to, but I brushed it off, thinking it was just his way of caring. Then, there was my mother-in-law, Margaret. Oh, Margaret, where do I even start? Olivia, dear, don't you think it's time you focused more on keeping a proper home? She'd say during her weekly visits, glancing at the pile of sketches on my desk. I'm working on a big project, Margaret. The house is clean enough. Well, I suppose if you think so, but don't you agree that Ethan deserves a tidy home to come back to? She'd add, making me grit my teeth. I'd just nod and try to keep the peace for Ethan's sake, but it wasn't easy. Thank goodness for my best friend, Zoe. She's a kick-ass lawyer who always had my back. Liv, you know you don't have to put up with Margaret's nonsense, right? She'd tell me during our coffee dates. I know, but it's important to Ethan. I want to make it work. Zoe would give me that look, part concern, part girl, you're crazy. My parents, Jack and Linda, were always my support system. When things got tough, I knew I could count on them. Sweetie, are you sure everything's okay with Ethan? Mom would ask during Sunday dinners. It's fine, Mom, we're just adjusting. Dad would squeeze my hand, his eyes full of worry. You know you can always come home if you need to, right? I'd laugh it off and tell them everything was fine, but deep down, I wondered if they could see something I couldn't. Then, the day came when I found out I was pregnant. I was thrilled. I really thought this would bring Ethan and me closer, maybe even make Margaret a bit softer toward me. Ethan, I have amazing news, I said, bursting into his study, holding the pregnancy test. He looked up from his computer, his face unreadable. What is it, Olivia? I'm kind of busy. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby. For just a moment, I saw something flash across his face. Was it joy? Or maybe panic? I couldn't quite tell what Ethan was feeling, but then he smiled, stood up, and hugged me. That's wonderful, honey, he said, though his tone didn't quite match his words. I tried to push away the nagging feeling inside. This was supposed to be a happy moment, right? Things would get better now, at least, that's what I thought. Oh, how wrong I was. I figured that telling everyone about the baby would make things better, but I was way off. When I told Ethan's mother, Margaret, the news, her reaction was as cold as an Alaskan winter. Oh, well, I suppose congratulations are in order, she said, her lips tight like she'd just tasted something sour. I do hope you're ready for this, Olivia. Motherhood isn't for the faint of heart. I forced a smile, trying to hide how disappointed I felt. I'm sure, with family support, we'll manage just fine. Margaret just huffed and muttered something about modern women thinking they can have it all. As the weeks passed, Ethan became more distant. He'd come home late, barely say a word to me, and spent his weekends with his mother instead of helping me get ready for the baby. One night, I finally confronted him. Ethan, can we talk? I feel like you've been avoiding me lately. He barely looked up from his phone. What? No, I've just been busy with work. You're being oversensitive. Oversensitive? Ethan, I'm pregnant with your child, and you're acting like I don't even exist. He finally put his phone down, but his eyes were cold. Look, Olivia, I'm doing my best here. What more do you want from me? Tears started to fill my eyes. I want my husband back. I want us to be excited about this baby together. Ethan just sighed and walked out of the room, leaving me feeling more alone than ever. Things reached a breaking point one evening when I overheard Ethan and Margaret talking in hushed voices in the kitchen. My heart pounded as I crept closer to listen. Mom, I don't know what to do. I never wanted kids, you know that, Ethan was saying. Margaret's voice was sharp. Well, it's too late for that now, isn't it? Unless what? Ethan asked. Unless we find a way to get rid of her, Margaret suggested. I gasped, shocked by what I was hearing. Without thinking, I burst into the kitchen, startling them both. Get rid of me? Is that what you want, Ethan? I shouted, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. Ethan's face went pale. Olivia, you weren't supposed to hear that. Oh, I'm sorry, was I just supposed to sit quietly while you plotted behind my back? Margaret stepped forward, her eyes burning with anger. Now, Olivia, let's not be dramatic, we were simply discussing options. Options? I'm carrying your grandchild, and you're talking about me like I'm just a problem to be solved? I shouted, hurt and angry. Ethan suddenly slammed his fist on the counter. Enough, you want the truth? Fine, I never wanted this baby. Olivia, you trapped me. His words hit me like a physical blow. Trapped you? We're married. Ethan, we talked about having kids. No, he snapped, you talked about it. I just nodded along to keep you happy, but I'm done pretending. Tears were streaming down my face. So what? You want me to leave? Is that it? Margaret's voice was cold as ice. I think that would be best for everyone, don't you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You can't be serious, Ethan, please tell me you don't agree with this. But the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. Without saying another word, I ran upstairs and started throwing things into a suitcase. As I was heading back downstairs, Ethan blocked my way. Where do you think you're going? He demanded. Away from you, I spat. Isn't that what you wanted? He grabbed my arm, gripping it tightly. You're not taking anything, get out now. I pulled my arm free, shocked by his aggression. Fine, keep it all. I don't want anything from you. As I walked out the door, I heard Margaret's voice behind me. Don't come crawling back when you realize you can't handle this on your own. The door slammed shut, and just like that, I was alone, pregnant, with nowhere to go, standing on the sidewalk. As my world fell apart around me, I realized this was only the beginning of my fight. I went to my parents' house, tears running down my face. When I knocked on the door, I barely managed to say, Mom, Dad, I need help. They didn't hesitate to take me in. Once I settled into my old room, my mom gently asked, Sweetie, what happened? Through my sobs, I told them everything. My dad's face turned red with anger. That no good son of a Jack, Mom warned, though I could see she was furious too. The next day, I called Zoe. As soon as she answered, she said, Liv, oh my God, I'm coming over right now. When she arrived, Zoe was all business. Okay, we need to document everything, dates, times, witnesses if possible. But Zoe, I said, I don't want to cause trouble, I just want to move on. She grabbed my hands. Olivia, listen to me, this isn't just about you anymore, it's about protecting those babies. I nodded, realizing she was right. Over the next few weeks, we built a file, every nasty text, every witness to Margaret's behavior, and every example of Ethan's controlling nature. In the meantime, I threw myself into freelance work. Then one day, I got a call from a major tech company. Miss Thompson, we'd like to offer you a contract for our rebranding project. I nearly dropped the phone. This was huge. Yes, absolutely, thank you so much, I replied, trying to stay calm. As my belly grew, so did my determination. At my 20-week scan, the technician smiled and said, Congratulations, it's twins. I laughed through happy tears. 2? Oh my goodness. But my joy didn't last long. Zoe called me, her voice tense. Liv, you need to see this, she said and sent me a screenshot of Ethan's social media post. It read, Heartbroken, my wife has abandoned our marriage and our unborn child. Please respect our privacy during this difficult time. I felt sick. How can he lie like this? Zoe's voice was firm. Don't worry, we'll use this against him later. As my due date approached, I overheard my parents talking. My mom sounded worried. Jack, what if Ethan tries to take the babies? Over my dead body, my dad growled. I stepped into the room. He won't. I won't let him. The day I went into labor, I was terrified but ready. After 18 grueling hours, I heard the most beautiful sound, my daughter's cries. Hello, Lily, hello, Rose, I whispered as I held them close. Weeks passed, and I started settling into motherhood. One night, while feeding Rose, I got a text from an unknown number. It's Mike from Ethan's office, you need to know something. Intrigued, I called him back. Mike, what's going on? His voice was low. Olivia, the company is cooking the books. Ethan's right in the middle of it. I can't be part of this anymore. I felt a mix of shock and satisfaction. Mike, I need you to tell me everything. Over the next hour, he explained the whole fraudulent scheme, and I recorded every word. The next day, I called Zoe. I've got something big, I said. When I played her the recording, her eyes widened. Olivia, this changes everything. We're not just dealing with a custody battle anymore, this is criminal. I took a deep breath. What do we do? Zoe's smile was fierce. We build an ironclad case, and then we take them down. As I looked at my sleeping daughters, a new resolve filled me. Ethan and Margaret thought they could break me, but they had no idea who they were up against. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore, I was fighting for Lily and Rose, and I was going to win. 6 months flew by in a whirlwind of diapers, sleepless nights, and small moments of joy with my girls, but today was the day I had been preparing for. I stood outside Ethan and Margaret's house, my heart pounding. You ready? Zoe asked, adjusting her suit jacket. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Let's do this. We walked in unannounced, the twins in their stroller. The room went silent, and Ethan's face turned pale. Olivia, what are you doing here? He stammered. I smiled sweetly. Surprise. Honey, meet your daughters. Margaret stepped forward, her face twisted with anger. You have no right to be here. Zoe jumped in, her voice firm. Actually, she has every right. Ethan, you've been served. She handed him a thick envelope. As he read it, his hands shook. Divorce? Custody? Olivia, you can't be serious. I stood my ground. Oh, I'm dead serious. Every instance of your abuse, your abandonment, it's all in there. Margaret scoffed. Abuse? Don't be ridiculous. I pulled out my phone. Shall we listen to the recording of you two plotting to get rid of me again? The room erupted into chaos. Family members shouted, demanding answers. Amid the uproar, there was a knock at the door. A serious-looking man in a suit entered. Ethan Thompson? I'm Agent Carter from the FBI. We need to talk about your company's financials. Ethan's face went from pale to green. I don't know what you're talking about. I stepped forward. But I do, Agent Carter, and I have the evidence. The next few hours were a blur. Ethan was taken in for questioning. The family gathering broke apart in shock, and Margaret was left muttering excuses to people who weren't listening. Months later, I sat in the courtroom, listening to the judge's final verdict. Full custody is awarded to Olivia Thompson. Mr. Thompson, you will be held in custody pending your fraud trial. As Ethan was led away, Margaret shot me a glare that could melt steel, but I just smiled and turned away. Outside, surrounded by my parents, Zoe, and my beautiful girls, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. It's over, I whispered. Zoe squeezed my hand. No, Liv, it's just beginning. Looking at my daughters, I knew she was right. We had a whole new life ahead of us, free from the toxicity and full of love, and I couldn't wait to start. That's the end of Olivia's journey. Now, I have a question for you. If you were in Olivia's shoes, would you have given Ethan a second chance? Or do you think cutting ties completely was the right move? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences and opinions matter. They might even help someone going through a similar situation. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life dramas. Thanks for watching.
Running a hotel wasn't just a job for me, it was my whole world. I'm Grace, and this hotel meant everything to me. Until one day he walked in. He was hard to miss. A young man in a fancy suit, looking like he had a lot of money. He was busy with his expensive phone. But when he checked in, he did it with a smile that could knock you over. "Good evening, I'm Ethan," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I'm staying for a couple of nights. Anything interesting going on around here?" His charm caught me off guard, and I couldn't help but smile back. "Well, Ethan, this city's full of surprises. Depends on what you're into," I replied, giving him his key. Our chat was short, but it left an impression on me. Maybe it was his curiosity, or maybe it was how genuinely interested he seemed in what I had to say. He didn't stay long, but when he left, there was a note on the counter. "Enjoyed our talk. Care to continue it over dinner?" It read. I hesitated, not used to mixing work with my personal life, but there was something about him that drew me in. We met at a cozy local restaurant, away from the hustle and bustle. "You really know this place well, Grace," Ethan said with a smile as we sat down. I laughed, feeling strangely comfortable. I guess you could say I've spent a lot of time here. As we talked, time flew by. Ethan seemed like an open book, sharing stories of his travels and investments. When the conversation turned to me, I found myself opening up more than usual. I told him about losing my parents and how it had been just my sister Mia and me against the world since I was 21. That's a lot to handle, Grace. You must be really strong, Ethan said, his eyes showing admiration. I shrugged, trying to brush off the compliment. We all deal with what life throws at us, right? Mia has always been my priority. Our parents left us a little something, and I've been careful with it, trying to make it grow. He nodded thoughtfully. Impressive. You've got a good head on your shoulders. As the night went on, I realized something. I hadn't laughed this much in a long time. But whenever I tried to learn more about Ethan's family, he skillfully changed the subject. My folks and I don't see eye to eye. Let's just say they have their ideas about life, and I have mine, he said, a shadow crossing his face. I didn't push further. We all have our own stories and scars. As the evening drew to a close, I found myself not wanting it to end. There was something about Ethan that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. Life with Ethan felt like a whirlwind. Every day was a new adventure, and every moment together was filled with laughter and dreams of the future. He had this knack for making ordinary things seem extraordinary, turning simple dinners into unforgettable evenings. One evening, as we sat in our favorite little cafe, the one with the dim lights and cozy corners, I said to him, "Ethan, I still can't believe how fast everything is moving." He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "Grace, when something feels right, why wait? I've never been sure of anything in my life," he replied, his eyes holding mine with intensity. "I know it's just. Everything's happening so fast. It's a lot to take in," I confessed, feeling a whirlpool of emotion swirling inside me. He squeezed my hand gently. "I get it. But trust me, Grace, I'm here for the long haul. I want to build a life with you, a future. And I want to start by making our wedding day the most memorable day of our lives." The way he spoke about our wedding with such passion and certainty made it hard not to get caught up in his vision. He painted a picture of a day so lavish and beautiful it took my breath away. Imagine it, Grace. A ceremony that no one will forget. A celebration of our love. "It's going to be perfect," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "And the honeymoon. You mentioned something about the most expensive hotel in the world," I asked, a mix of curiosity and apprehension in my voice. His smile widened. "Yes, it's all part of the plan. But I need you to trust me, to take this leap with me. Your savings for the wedding, my funds for the honeymoon, and our future home together. We'll make this a reality." I hesitated, the practical part of me screaming caution. But looking into his eyes, full of love and promise, I found myself nodding. "Okay, Ethan, let's do it. Let's make this wedding a day to remember." As the weeks flew by, the wedding preparations took over everything. Ethan was proactive, taking care of every detail to ensure our day would be spectacular. Watching him so full of life and determination made me fall even deeper in love. "Ethan, you're amazing. The way you're handling everything. I don't know how to thank you," I said one evening as we reviewed the guest list and the lavish menu he planned. He pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me. "Grace, seeing you happy is all the thanks I need. This wedding, it's just the beginning. Our life together is going to be even more beautiful." But amidst the excitement, doubts crept in. Was I moving too fast? Was I getting swept away by the romance of it all? Every time those thoughts surfaced, Ethan's assurances were there to chase them away. His words, his promises, they were my anchor holding me steady in the storm of uncertainty. The wedding preparations filled my days, but amidst the whirl of cake tastings and flower selections, I knew I needed Mia, my sister, my confidant, by my side. Since our parents passed, it had been us against the world, and her input meant everything to me, especially now. I called her up, hoping she could sneak away from the cafe she worked at. "Hey, Mia, think you can ditch the aprons and coffee smells for some tulle and satin today?" I half joked, my voice laced with hopeful anticipation. Mia's laughter came through the phone, light and familiar. For you, sis, I'll trade coffee stains for bridal trains any day. Give me an hour to wrap things up here, and I'm all yours. The bridal shop was a wonderland of white and ivory dresses cascading like waterfalls of lace and silk. As I tried on gowns, Mia's presence was a calming force in the storm of satin and sequins. That one, Grace, it's like it was made for you, Mia said, her eyes lighting up as I stepped out of the dressing room in a gown that felt just right. I studied my reflection, the dress hugging every curve and cascading to the floor in a sea of soft fabric. Do you think I feel, I don't know, like a real bride? I admitted, a smile creeping onto my lips. Mia's grin matched mine. But in a fleeting moment, I caught a shadow pass over her face, quick and troubling. Before I could question it, she was up, pulling a dress off the rack. Mind if I give this one a whirl? Just for kicks, Mia said, holding up a stunning gown that caught the light with every movement. I laughed, the sound a mix of surprise and delight. Planning on eloping, are you? Or is there a mystery man you've been hiding from me? Mia's laugh, usually so carefree, held a note of something I couldn't quite place. Oh, Grace, you know me. Always a bridesmaid, never a bride. But a girl can dream, can't she? She quipped, though her gaze darted away, hiding something. The day rolled on, a blend of laughter and whispers of silk, but Mia's mood seemed to flip like a switch, her usual bubbly demeanor clouded by moments of distraction. Everything okay, Mia? You seem a bit off today, I probed gently, concern threading through my words. She was quick to dismiss it, a wave of her hand erasing my worries. It's nothing really. Just cafe chaos. You know how it gets, Maya assured me, but her forced smile didn't quite reach her eyes. As we left the bridal shop, the weight of her secrets seemed to hang between us, an unspoken tension that neither of us could quite navigate. I wanted to believe it was just pre-wedding stress, maybe a spat with a troublesome customer, but the nagging in my gut told me it was something more. That night, as I lay in bed, the excitement of finding the perfect dress was overshadowed by the puzzle that was Mia's behavior. She was the one person who had always been an open book to me, yet now there were pages I couldn't read, words hidden just out of sight. And as the wedding day edged closer, the joy I should have been feeling was tinged with a worry I couldn't shake. Mia and I have faced everything together, but now it felt like there was a growing gap, one filled with secrets and unasked questions. Little did I know, the answers to those questions were about to turn my world on its head. It was a day like any other, or so I thought, until Ethan left his phone buzzing and forgotten on the kitchen counter. As I went about tidying up the apartment, the constant notifications from his phone nagged at me, a persistent reminder of something amiss. The lack of a password was a surprise, but it was nothing compared to the shock that awaited me inside. The messages between Ethan and Mia were like a punch to the gut, each word a betrayal that tore through my heart. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to push me aside like I was nothing. Like all the years of sisterhood with Mia meant less than the dirt under their shoes. I read and reread Mia's message, confessing her pregnancy with Ethan's child. The words blurred as tears clouded my vision. Can't believe we pulled this off. She's such a fool, falling for every lie. And now, with the baby, we can finally be together, just as we planned, it read. The world around me seemed to spin, a carousel of deceit and treachery. Ethan's reply was no better, declaring his love for Mia and his eagerness to see me humiliated, ousted from my own wedding. She's just a knave cash cow. Can't wait to get rid of her and start our real life together. This wedding will be perfect, thanks to her money, he wrote. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand, a storm of emotions raging within me. Betrayal, anger, disbelief. They all fought for dominance. But above all, a cold determination began to take root. They thought they could use me, discard me like an old toy. I'd show them the price of underestimating Grace Anderson. When Ethan returned, his carefree demeanor was like a slap in the face. Hey, babe, did I miss any important calls? He asked casually, picking up his phone. I forced a smile, my insides burning with anger. Nope, just the usual stuff. Busy day, I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. He flashed that charming smile. The one I now knew was nothing but a mask, as always. But nothing's more important than coming back to you, he said, leaning in for a kiss. I had to force myself not to recoil. From that moment on, I played the part of the oblivious fiancé to perfection. I smiled, I nodded, I went along with the wedding plans. But behind the scenes, I was planning my revenge on the two people who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Each passing day was a test of my will, a balancing act between the role I had to play and the fury that burned within. But I wouldn't let them see me break. I'd bide my time, and when the moment was right, they'd learn the true cost of their treachery. And as I lay in bed each night, the image of Ethan and Mia's deceitful faces etched into my mind, I made a silent vow. They would pay for what they'd done, and their twisted game would be their undoing. I was no longer just the jilted fiancé. I was the architect of their downfall, and my revenge would be meticulous, calculated, and oh so sweet. The days leading up to the wedding felt surreal. On the surface, everything was perfect. The flowers, the guest list, the dress. But beneath the facade of perfection was a storm brewing, a tempest of anger and betrayal that I held tightly within. Ethan was his usual self, all smiles and affection, blissfully unaware of the storm he was about to sail into. Grace, everything's coming together so beautifully. This wedding is going to be the talk of the town, he said one evening as we reviewed the final preparations. I nodded, my smile practiced and polished. Yes, it's going to be a day to remember, I replied, the words laced with a meaning he couldn't possibly grasp. Mia was harder to face. The sister I had loved and protected was now a stranger, her every word and gesture a reminder of her betrayal. Yet I kept my mask firmly in place, the mask of the loving sister, blissfully ignorant of the knife she had planted in my back. Grace, you're handling everything so well. I don't know how you do it, Maya said one day as we finalized the seating arrangements. I looked at her, the sister I thought I knew, and forced a laugh. Oh, Mia, you know me. Always had a knack for organizing chaos, I said, the irony of the statement not lost on me. As the wedding day drew closer, the tension became almost tangible, a tightrope I walked with precision and care. Ethan's phone was now always guarded, his conversations hushed and hurried. But it didn't matter. I had seen enough, knew enough. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, a beautiful day for a beautiful disaster. As I got ready, the reflection in the mirror showed a bride serene and poised. But behind the veil and the makeup was a woman on a mission, a woman who would no longer be played in someone else's game. Mia is running late, huh? Ethan remarked casually, adjusting his tie. I met his gaze in the mirror, my eyes giving nothing away. Yes, but she'll be here. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied, the double meaning clear in my voice. He nodded, oblivious to the undercurrents. Well, she's always been a bit unpredictable. But today's about us, Grace. Our new beginning, he said. I turned to face him, my smile a masterpiece of composure. Yes, Ethan, a new beginning indeed, I said, my heart steeling itself for what was about to come. And as I walked down the aisle, the eyes of friends and family on me, I knew that this was it. The calm before the storm was over, and the reckoning was about to begin. The vows were waiting, the guests were watching, and the stage was set. It was time for the truth to come crashing down, and for the real show to begin. Standing next to Ethan in front of the priest, my heart was a mix of hope and trepidation. The words of the vows hovered in the air, a promise of forever that was about to be shattered in the most brutal way. The guests, unaware of the storm about to break, watched us with smiles and teary eyes. But then the unimaginable happened. Mia, dressed in a bridal gown that mirrored my own, stormed down the aisle, her eyes locked on mine, not with sisterly love, but with a cold determination that chilled me to the bone. Move aside, Grace. I'm the one who deserves to be here. Ethan loves me, and this child I'm carrying is his, Maya declared, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. The room erupted into whispers and gasps, the guests turning to each other in confusion and disbelief. Ethan, rather than showing any sign of shock or remorse, let out a hearty laugh, his true colors shining through the polished facade. "Well said, Mia. Grace, you've been a good host. But this is where your part ends. Why don't you join the audience? This is Mia's moment now." Ethan sneered, his words dripping with mockery and contempt. The audacity of their betrayal, so public and so cruel, sent a shockwave through the crowd. But as the reality of the situation sank in, my reaction surprised everyone, including myself. I looked at Ethan, then at Mia, and smiled. Of course, why not? I wouldn't want to miss the show after all. I did pay for it, I said, my voice calm, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. Mia and Ethan exchanged a confused glance, clearly not expecting such a composed response. The guests, too, were baffled, their eyes darting between us, trying to make sense of the surreal scene unfolding before them. As I gracefully took a seat among the guests, my head held high, the whispers grew louder. What's she up to? Is she really going to let this happen? The questions buzzed around the room like a swarm of bees. But I remained serene, a statue amidst the chaos. Ethan and Mia, now standing together at the altar, looked unnerved. My calm demeanor had thrown them off their plan to humiliate and discard me, not unfolding as they had anticipated. "What's your game, Grace? Why are you so calm?" Ethan asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and concern. I met his gaze, my smile never wavering. "No game, Ethan. Just enjoying the fruits of my labor. Please proceed. I'm eager to see how this plays out," I replied, my words like velvet-covered daggers. The ceremony resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. The guests watched in a mix of shock and anticipation, unsure whether they were witnessing a wedding or the prelude to a dramatic reckoning. As Mia and Ethan exchanged vows, the words felt hollow, a mockery of the sacred promise they were supposed to represent. And as I sat there, surrounded by friends and family who were struggling to comprehend the spectacle, I knew that this was just the beginning. The real show was yet to come, and Mia and Ethan, in their arrogance and deceit, had just secured front row seats to their own downfall. As the priest asked if anyone objected, the doors burst open. A woman older and more worn than either Ethan stormed in, her eyes blazing with fury. "Stop this wedding right now," she demanded, her voice slicing through the silence like a knife. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" he stammered, the mask of the perfect groom slipping away. "I'm here to stop you from making a bigger fool of yourself and these people. Grace, you deserve to know the truth," Catherine said, turning to me with a sympathetic look. The murmurs among themselves, the scandal unfolding before them, more gripping than any soap opera. Maya clutched her stomach, her face a mask of shock and fear. Catherine continued, her voice firm and clear. "Ethan is a liar and a cheat. He's in debt up to his ears. His investments failed, and he's been using you all to dig himself out of his hole. And Mia, you poor girl, you're just another pawn in his game." The room erupted into chaos, the guests rising from their seats, the whispers growing louder. Ethan tried to speak, but his words were drowned out by the uproar. I stood up, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. "There's more," I announced, silencing the room. "I hired a private detective after I discovered Ethan and Mia's affair. Not only is Ethan already married and drowning in debt, but he's also been hiding a daughter, a child he's never supported," I declared. Mia's face crumpled, the reality of her situation crashing down around her. "Ethan, is this true? Tell me she's lying," she pleaded, her voice breaking. Ethan, now pale and defeated, had no words. His lies, his deceit, all laid bare for the world to see. But the final blow was yet to come. As the guests processed the revelations, Ethan's parents, two stern and imposing figures, entered the room. I had reached out to them, told them everything, and now they were here to confront the son who had brought shame to their name. Ethan's father, a man of few words, spoke with a voice that resonated with disappointment and anger. Ethan, you are no son of mine. Your actions today and in the past have shown your true character. You are cut off from our family and our fortune. As the room settled into an uneasy silence, I looked at Ethan, Mia, and the shattered dreams they had tried to build on the foundation of deceit. The pain of betrayal still throbbed in my heart. But standing there amidst the ruins of what was meant to be my happiest day, I knew that this was not the end of my story. In the aftermath, I found myself in the cold halls of justice, seeking reparation for the damage Ethan had caused. The courtroom felt like another world, a place where the pain and humiliation I had endured were translated into legal jargon and paperwork. Ethan, you've not only broken a promise, but you've also shattered trust and exploited generosity. You owe me more than just an apology. You owe me compensation for turning my life upside down. I stated firmly. The judge's gavel sounded like thunder in the tense silence. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant is hereby ordered to pay $50,000 in damages for the distress and financial loss caused, he declared. As I walked out of the courtroom, the burden of the past months felt lighter. Justice had been served, but the road to healing was just beginning. Ethan's troubles didn't end with me. Catherine, his legal wife, fueled by hurt and fury, launched her own legal battle, demanding compensation for his infidelity and neglect of their child. Life moved on, but the scars of those tumultuous months remained. I focused on rebuilding my life, on finding peace in the simple things. I had loved and lost, trusted and been betrayed. But through it all, I had survived. And as I looked back on everything that had happened, I realized that the most important journey was the one I was taking within myself, a journey of healing, of rediscovering my strength, and of learning to trust and love again. My husband, Charles, told me he wants to marry the woman he's been seeing and asked for a divorce. He didn't want to bother with splitting our things, just wanted me to leave quickly. Sharon, his new girlfriend, seemed to enjoy seeing me upset. Donald, our friend, is also leaving because he's in love with a woman he met at a bar. They both don't want to live with me anymore. I agreed to leave as they wished, but before I go, I want to speak my mind. My name is Joy Lynn, and I'm 50 years old. Life hasn't always been joyful for me, despite my name. But now, I've found happiness, and I can laugh at the past. Let me tell you about when I was 35, about to celebrate my 10th wedding anniversary with Charles. We didn't have any children, and it was painful to hear people ask us why or tell us how wonderful kids are. Charles and I didn't talk much anymore. His job had gotten busier after a promotion, and he was traveling a lot. I was busy with work too, so we hardly spent time together. Maybe that's why we never had children. I used to think that whether we had kids or not didn't really matter much in a marriage. Then one day, our family unexpectedly grew, but not in the way we hoped. Instead of a baby, it was Charles' parents who seemed like they came straight from hell. Apparently, ever since we got married, they'd been pressuring Charles to let them live with us. Charles thought it might be easier to just give in rather than keep saying no. He thought it was a rational decision, even though I didn't agree. He argued that since I was hardly ever home, it wouldn't bother me much. But I had issues with his parents even before we lived together. They were always asking when we have kids, which made me uncomfortable. Sharon, Charles' new girlfriend, was also pushing for more children every time we saw her. Living with Charles' parents was a stomach-churning experience. I had only given birth to Charles, so it was quite unsettling. I had imagined it would be difficult, but it turned out even worse than I expected. Donald solemnly declared that they wouldn't provide any pension or living expenses. Sharon seemed pleased with this arrangement. I was confused. Charles also agreed, saying we could manage without financial support since we both worked. I never had many complaints about Charles before, but now I felt dissatisfied. I used to think a husband who was calm and hardworking was enough. Living with Charles' parents made me realize why they wanted to stay with us. Donald often went out at night, claiming he was meeting friends for drinks. But then, I found a point card from a nightclub and a business card with Nancy written on it in the laundry. It seemed there were different types of bars involved. This was clearly a service industry that directly satisfies a man's desires. Donald seemed to have a liking for Nancy. I couldn't believe he had so much energy at his age. I meant this in a negative way. No wonder he couldn't provide us with living expenses. He was probably spending it on Nancy. On the other hand, Sharon started harassing me gradually. She was cunning and made the harassment worse. It got to a point where I didn't even notice it at first. Initially, I thought she was being kind. I could have handled it if it was just about how I did laundry or cooked. But Sharon started calling me by Charles' ex-girlfriend's name. She would apologize, saying she remembered her because she was Charles's first girlfriend, whom he introduced to Sharon. At first, I thought maybe Sharon's age was causing her to make mistakes. But as it continued, I realized something was off. Every time I took a shower, the bathroom was dirty. I initially thought it was Charles or someone else, but since nobody complained about it being dirty, it had to be Sharon who used it before me. There were other instances too, like when Sharon mistakenly thought everyone had already bathed on a snowy day and unplugged the bathtub, leaving me to shower in freezing cold water. She also once took my favorite necklace from the closet without asking and then lost it. Each time, Sharon would say she didn't do it on purpose, she just wasn't thinking, and she apologized. While it's possible to accidentally shower or call someone by the wrong name, taking jewelry without permission is not something that can be brushed off as a mere oversight. I started to suspect that Sharon's behavior towards me was intentional harassment when I saw her angrily sitting at the dining table, complaining that dinner was late because I came home late. It dawned on me that this was indeed harassment, albeit subtle. I realized Sharon hadn't done any housework since she arrived. She threw her socks inside out into the laundry and tossed bottles into the trash without removing the labels, creating small inconveniences each time. She complained if meals were late or if the sheets were messy, and sometimes she even threw things around. I finally understood that our home was disrupted by the arrival of not one, but two babies, both big and delightfully stubborn. Exhausted from my job as a caregiver, all I wanted was to escape this situation and go to bed, so I silently tolerated Sharon's behavior. I didn't have the energy to argue with anyone. When I returned home, I just wanted to rest as quickly as possible, even if it was just for a moment. While I was too tired to notice at first, it seemed Sharon knew about Donald's nighttime outings. When an actress named Nancy appeared on TV, Sharon persistently asked Donald if he liked girls like her. Donald looked pale after that incident. I once asked Sharon if she was okay with Donald going out like that. She replied that if she got a divorce, she would be someone with a history of divorce at her age, which would look bad to society. She said she didn't like it, of course. He's just fooling around with professionals at the bar, right? If he's not serious, I can accept it. She wasn't holding back from divorce because of her concern for Donald, but rather because she feared having a history of divorce. I couldn't understand it. Turning a blind eye to infidelity must be causing her significant internal stress. Sharon's outlet for that stress was harassing me. By harassing me, she could vent her stress and avoid doing housework. It was like killing two birds with one stone. I was certain I knew why Sharon insisted on living with us. As we lived with Charles' parents, he increasingly made excuses not to come home, saying he had to work overtime. This house was rotten from the roots to the pillars. At this rate, even I might end up crushed under the rotten floorboards. Then, one day, about 6 months after we started living together, Charles, who rarely had the same day off, said something unexpected. "Please, let's get a divorce." It was a shock. It turns out, Charles had been having an affair with a classmate for a long time. He even said he wanted to marry her, and I had no clue. Apparently, they started dating just before he got promoted. I thought he was working hard for our sake, but could it have been for his classmate? Was it my fault for not paying attention to Charles' behavior? Using my exhaustion as an excuse, I thought affairs only happened on TV or to people like Donald. Maybe it's natural for Charles to cheat, given that Donald does it too. Once this house is ready, my girlfriend and I are moving in. You can take your things and leave, Charles declared. Sharon asked what's going to happen to us. You can stay. My girlfriend doesn't mind sharing, Charles responded. What a nice girl, Donald chimed in. Don't let her get away with it. If she asks for property division, we're going to use this house and everything in it. Yeah, she's a really good girl, especially if she's cuter than Joy Len, Sharon added, giving Donald a look as if to say, there you go again with women. Charles and Donald just laughed. These people are hopeless, I replied. All right, I'm fine with the divorce. There's a memorial ceremony in Atlanta soon, right? Can you wait until then? Charles scoffed. Planning on enjoying the feast at the memorial ceremony, are you? How pathetic. There's no way I'm taking the woman who's divorcing me. Just leave already. I shot back. Who's the pathetic one here? Who cares about the food? Despite everything, Sharon and I, the only women in the room, both cheated on, couldn't seem to get along. No, I was planning to move out on that day. Going back home is a bit embarrassing since I was cheated on. Finding a place and handling the paperwork takes time. I thought it would work out around then, I explained. Charles, not Sharon, replied condescendingly. If that's the case, fine. Cheating and then acting all high and mighty. Don't underestimate me. I'll destroy everything. A week passed, and the long-awaited day of revenge finally arrived. That day, my parents-in-law and Charles left the house early in the morning to attend a memorial ceremony in Atlanta, planning to return by evening. All right then, let's give it a try, I thought. The garbage collection service I had hired arrived, and I had them load all the furniture in the house into the truck. The sofa, the microwave, Charles, and the parents-in-law's bed, Sharon's clothes that had accumulated since moving in, Charles' favorite new vacuum cleaner, even the refrigerator and its contents. All of it gone. Ah, minimalism is wonderful, I thought. With each item thrown away, it felt like my troubles were disappearing. Next, the movers came to transport my important belongings to my new place. By evening, the house was empty. The front door made a sound. It seemed Charles and the others had returned. I decided to greet them one last time as a good wife and stood at the entrance with a smile. What, you're still here? Charles frowned openly, as did my parents-in-law. Oh, that's harsh. It's the last time. So it's fine to see each other's faces before leaving, right? I wanted to see your face. Charles blushed slightly and chuckled. What's the big deal? Fine. Let's have a meal together one last time, shall we? Charles, strangely in a good mood, heads towards the living room. Saying this, followed by Sharon, who looks exasperated, saying, Charles is so sweet. Donald, on the other hand, turns to me with a proud look, saying, that's my son. I'm baffled. Having a meal together would have been a nice way to part if there was anything left to eat. Huh? What? The meaning of my words hits Charles upon opening the living room door. He lets out a silent exclamation. Sharon, annoyed, peeks into the living room after Charles and exclaims, just like him. Donald does the same. Wait, why? The fridge? No, even the furniture, appliances too. Why is there nothing anywhere? Of course, I threw them out. The house feels much bigger now, doesn't it? I thought it would be bad to leave old furniture for your new life with your girlfriend. Consider it my parting gift. Why weren't you preparing to move? I've already moved. You throw away things you don't need when you move, right? Have you forgotten most of the things we bought when we got married were purchased with my money? Nothing bad will happen just because I, who didn't need them, threw them away. At my words, Charles points at me, his mouth moving but no words coming out. He seems too shocked to speak. With this, I'll forego any division of property. Well, there's hardly anything to divide anyway, I continue. Sharon, furious at my smile, says, what have you done? I'll return that phrase to your foolish son. There are limits to indecency, like cheating while having a wife and then saying to leave because you're remarrying. Wasn't your upbringing at fault? How could you speak to me like that? You were such a terrible daughter-in-law. Do you still consider yourself my mother-in-law? To me, you're just another old lady. I speak with a malicious smile, and Sharon mutters, so ungracious, shaking with anger. It's a secret that seeing Sharon angry is starting to be a bit fun. Don't you remember? If I ask for division of this house, you can't refuse, can you? Without the house, where would you two strangers live? You sold your family home, right? Yes, the parents-in-law had sold their house when they moved in with us. We won't need it anymore, they had said. So this house was absolutely necessary for them. They sided with their son's affair over his wife. Probably thinking, as long as there's a house with a housemaid, anything goes. Hearing my words, perhaps feeling rushed, Donald intervenes. Well, let's settle this amicably, pretending to be a good person. Yes, let's do that. Let's proceed calmly, just like the old man. I mean, just like Donald, suggests Sharon. Exactly. You know what I'm talking about, Joy Lynn. Of course. By the way, Donald, wasn't your cell phone broken today? Oh yeah, I realized it after leaving the house. It wouldn't turn on. If charging doesn't work, I guess I'll have to consult the store. There's no need for that. Your cell phone is right here, I say, pulling Donald's cell phone from my pocket. Huh? Two identical phones? What's going on? Donald is puzzled. I switched the phones just before you left today. The one I have is the real one, and the one you had is a used one I bought and removed the battery so it won't turn on. What? Since you aren't tech savvy, I thought you'd just give up easily, thinking it's broken or out of battery, I explain, smiling. Donald asks, why would you do that? Well, I have no clue. Speaking of which, you received an email today from your beloved Nancy, saying she had a good time the other day. You email each other daily, right? I'm so jealous of your close friendship, I continue. Donald gasps, while Sharon glares at him. So, Donald, you were out with Nancy the other day. Woohoo, more lively than with Sharon. But you should put a lock on your phone if you're cheating. You'll get caught easily. Stop it, Joy Lynn. But I thought cheating is wrong. Charles cheated on me, and it hurt. I know exactly how Sharon feels, so I did something nice at the end. I texted Nancy. I'm bored, let's break up. She was furious. I was dealing with this old man because he conveniently gives me money. Good thing you broke up safely. Oh, by the way, this is Nancy, Sharon, your enemy. Take a good look, I said, showing everyone a photo of Nancy and Donald as I returned the phone. That's when it happened. Charles showed a stern expression no one had seen before. Why, my girlfriend is. Everyone but Charles gasped. What's going on, Charles? What are you to Nancy? No, that's my line, Dad. Why are you taking pictures with Nancy? Because I'm her boyfriend, obviously. No, Nancy is my girlfriend. Isn't your girlfriend your classmate? We just met at a bar and started hanging out. Who would have thought that father and son were dating the same person? This development was also surprising for me. Ignoring Sharon and me, who were in shock, the men started a pointless argument about who was more suitable to be Nancy's boyfriend, which eventually escalated into a full-blown brawl, pulling each other's hair. The brawl ended when Charles pulled out a significant amount of Donald's precious thinning hair. After a glance at the soulless face of Donald, I loudly declared, Well, I'm off to my new place. Thank you for everything. I'll be claiming compensation for the affair next time. Bye. I had said there would be no property division, but I didn't mean compensation. Sharon realized that this was a serious affair and, swinging the bag she was holding, began furiously beating Donald in a rage. Donald stood there, head hung low, as if he had been burned out completely, unable to process everything happening all at once. Watching this living hell unfold beside me, I couldn't stop smiling as I hopped on my beloved scooter and left the scene. Although it's a far stretch in my mind, I felt like Tom Cruise in Top Gun. Oh, it's been a while since I've ridden down such a refreshing night road. This is the best. Later on, when I proposed divorce, including the alimony, Charles said, Please wait on the divorce. It seems that Sharon is also considering divorce, and there is a possibility that everyone might lose their homes or their circumstances might change. So he wants to save as much money as possible. He said things like, "Don't you think it's pitiful for us who once lived together to face such a difficult situation? And we need money now." But I didn't care, so I proceeded with the divorce talks without discussion and took as much money as I could get from Charles and his affair partner. When claiming the alimony, I felt a bit like an outlaw. But I hadn't done anything wrong. I had just done what was natural. Well, maybe tampering with someone's phone was slightly wrong. In the end, around the same time as our divorce, it seemed that Sharon also divorced Donald. Apparently, Donald and Nancy's affair had been going on for over 5 years, and Sharon couldn't forgive that they had a relationship in private as well. I don't quite understand why bar hopping is forgivable, but private relationships aren't. I thought there are various forms of marriage. Well, in the end, we're not married anymore. Anyway, Donald was sued for alimony by Sharon, and Charles was sued for alimony by me. So the saying blood will out held true, and the in-laws are now all scattered. Sharon, having been cheated on by Donald, seemed to have grown to despise men in general, including Charles, who had abandoned me in a similar manner. As a result, Charles and Sharon, after the divorce, are slowly becoming distant, though they do have minimal conversations. Donald, jobless, turned to Charles for help but was rejected, as Charles himself was barely scraping by. Charles is juggling multiple jobs, while Sharon, who had been a housewife since her early marriage, is experiencing work for the first time with a part-time job. Donald became a part-time worker, living in a cheap hotel. Charles, eager to marry Nancy, learned that she wasn't interested. Nancy saw both Charles and Donald as mere extensions of her bar work, as convenient sources of money. It turned out that Nancy had other men besides Charles in the same capacity. Charles, having been classmates with her, mistook her for being serious and believed she was his destiny. But in reality, it was a foolish and trivial story. In the end, both men were deemed unnecessary by Nancy, even as convenient sources of money, and were discarded. From my perspective, I thought, since I'm leaving, might as well destroy everything in the process, just as I aimed. I'm very satisfied having witnessed the spectacular collapse of a family. No one in that family valued each other, only caring about themselves, so the outcome was, in a way, inevitable. Essentially, they were a family in name only, lacking any compassion. Now, I think it was good that I got away from that household. On the other hand, while I still come home exhausted from work every day, living alone has freed up my time as I no longer need to allocate it for someone else. I have more freedom than when I was married. Back when I was married, I hardly had time to meet my college friends. But now I can travel with them on my days off and even have time for my hobbies. In college, I was part of the choir, so I decided to join a karaoke club. It seems that one can continue to improve in music no matter the age. I consistently win at the club's competitions and even earn cash prizes. Thanks to that, my wallet is always warmly filled. At the facility where I work, my colleague suggested hosting a karaoke recreation event since I'm good at it, and it was a huge hit. I received many compliments like "you're so good," and was thrilled to bring smiles to the residents through my personal hobby, something I hadn't expected. By the way, my go-to performances are Unchained Melody and My Heart Will Go On. The lyrics of older songs are just so wonderful. I don't really understand recent songs, but I guess I should study up. Though my days aren't glamorous, I'm surrounded by friendly colleagues, trustworthy friends, and kind residents who feel like family. Beyond work boundaries, finally, it seems like I've become the Joy Len I was meant to be. From now on, I aim to be someone who not only receives joy but also shares it with others. All right, let's do our best at work today. I'll wholeheartedly celebrate the residents' birthdays. When my husband's mom, Catherine, found out my husband had to move abroad for work, she decided we had to leave the house. We had nowhere to go, so I took my 2-year-old daughter to the park, feeling lost and unsure of what to do. Suddenly, police officers surrounded me, asking me to go to the station. It was raining hard, and I was shivering from the cold as I followed them. At the station, I was surprised to see someone unexpected waiting for me. Her name was Emma, and she told me she's turning 35 this year. Emma shared her story, how she met her husband, Bob, at work, and they got married after dating for a year. They had a daughter named Lily, and they lived with Bob's mom, Catherine. Emma explained that they used to rent a place, but after Catherine's husband died and she started having knee problems, they decided to buy a new apartment and live together. They thought it was better because the apartment had an elevator, which made life easier for Catherine. Buying an apartment was cheaper than a house, and since Bob's job often required travel, they chose somewhere with good transportation access. But even though we bought the house, my husband's transfer was put on hold for a while. However, he still travels a lot for work, even more than other employees. He goes on business trips about once a week to different states. With a 2-year-old daughter, it's really stressful for me when he's away. At first, my mother-in-law, Catherine, was helpful, but now she doesn't help with taking care of our daughter at all. In fact, she makes more work for me. She leaves her dishes dirty and cooking utensils unwashed, which adds to my workload. When I ask her to help out, she just apologizes and promises to do better next time. But I've noticed she rinses them when my husband is around, which makes me think she's doing it on purpose to make things difficult for me. Sometimes she'll offer to get something from the store for me, but then later she'll say she actually needed something herself. This happens a lot. I used to think she was just forgetful or that her bad knees made moving painful for her, so I wanted to help. But now I'm starting to feel like she's intentionally causing problems. I've thought about talking to my husband about it, but he's already stressed from work, and I don't want to add to his burden. This behavior from Catherine has been going on for years, and when I talked to a friend about it, she said it sounds like Catherine is bullying me. She suggested talking to my husband, but I worry that if I do, Catherine, who doesn't have any other family, might end up in a facility. At one point, I thought it would be better to just endure it. However, one day, something happened that changed how I felt. I planned to drop off Lily at my parents' place. They love having Lily over, and sometimes she stays for sleepovers. Thanks for always bringing Lily. We look forward to these visits. Why don't you stay over sometimes too? My mom said. I'd love to, but I'm worried about leaving Catherine alone. I'll head home. Don't spoil Lily with too many toys, I replied. After a brief chat, I decided to return to the apartment where Catherine was waiting. But when I got there, I realized I'd left the keys at home. At first, I was concerned, but then I remembered Catherine was home and decided to ring the intercom. I dialed the room number, but there was no response. I wondered if she had gone out, so I decided to wait outside for a while. But Catherine never returned. After about 2 hours, it got dark, and I followed another resident into the building. Catherine rarely goes out at night, so I was sure she was home. I pressed the intercom button, but still got no response. Eventually, I heard a faint sound from inside, confirming Catherine was indeed there. I tried the intercom a few more times, but she refused to come out. Feeling defeated, I stayed at a nearby motel for the night, planning to return when Bob was back from his business trip. When I told Bob what happened, he was upset on my behalf, but Catherine just said, "Oh, maybe I didn't hear because of my hearing. I'm getting old, you know," trying to hide her smirk. Relieved to be back inside, I grabbed my keys and went to pick up Lily from my parents' house. After discussing the situation with them, they said, "Sounds like she's giving you a hard time. If it becomes too much, you're always welcome back here." Their comforting words brought tears to my eyes, but in front of Lily, I quickly wiped them away and headed home. For a while, there were no more issues with Catherine. Then, out of the blue, Bob's international transfer got finalized. A permanent move, not just a business trip. Yeah, we finally bought a place, and now this international assignment. "What do you think?" Bob asked. I couldn't answer Bob's question immediately. Considering the potential stress for Lily, I decided it would be best for the two of us to stay in the U.S. Soon after the decision, Bob had to leave for Europe. Although he was concerned about us, he seemed too swamped with work to give it much thought. So the life of me, Lily, and Catherine was about to begin. However, as expected, living with Catherine turned sour the moment Bob left for Europe. Her attitude changed dramatically. That day, a storm was approaching, and it was dangerous to venture outside. Yet Catherine dropped a bombshell on me. "Now that Bob's gone, wouldn't it be better if you and Lily move out?" she said. "Excuse me? What do you mean?" I asked, shocked. "Just what I said. I'll take over from here. I just feel I can't relax with strangers in the house." "I'd appreciate it if you could leave right now," Catherine replied. I was in complete disbelief at Catherine's audacity. It's true that Catherine and I aren't related, but I've always tried my best to make our cohabitation comfortable. At the very least, I've always treated her as family. However, to Catherine, it seems we were just an afterthought. I was considering gathering my things and heading back to my parents' place when she told me, instead of dilly-dallying, "Why don't you just get out?" Before I knew it, dressed as we were, Lily and I were thrown out of our own home. No matter how much I banged on the door, Catherine wouldn't come out. Lost and confused, I carried Lily through the pouring rain to a nearby park. There was a roof there, which I thought might offer some shelter from the rain. Ideally, I would have checked into a motel or returned to my parents' place, but I'd left both my wallet and phone inside the house. I felt helpless and sat in the park, trying to figure out our next move. I'm not sure how much time passed in the torrential downpour. Overwhelmed by fatigue and cold, I began to doze off. It was already dark, and even though it was summer, the cold was biting, and I feared we might catch a cold. As bad as things were, it seemed the only option was to walk to my parents' home, but it would be a 3-hour walk. As I was contemplating our situation, I saw 2 distant lights approaching. Given the rain, I couldn't see clearly, but the lights belonged to 2 police officers. I thought maybe they could help. But before I could approach, one of them called out to me. "Are you Emma? And is this little one Lily?" the officer asked. I was surprised the officer knew my name but weakly replied, "Yes, that's us." Then the officer said, "Please come to the station with us." Why the police station? I wondered if something was amiss. Urged by the officer, Lily, and I got into the patrol car. We were freezing from being out in the rain for so long, but the officers had thoughtfully brought large towels. "You might need these. We've got some spare clothes back at the station for you," they said kindly. Wondering why they knew about us and why we were headed to the police station, I inquired, "How did you know where to find us?" They responded, "We'll explain everything once we're back at the station. For now, just try to relax." Exhausted, I soon fell asleep and woke up to find we had arrived at the police station. Following the officers inside, to my surprise, I saw Catherine and my uncle. "Uncle, what are you doing here?" I asked. "He was contacted by Bob. Bob suspected you might be having issues with his mom, and since he's abroad, he wanted me to keep an eye on things for him," my uncle explained. According to my uncle, Bob had spoken to him about this issue. Before he said Bob had requested him to keep an eye on things since he couldn't be there himself, being overseas. It turns out he saw us in the rain earlier today. He was considering taking us in himself, but thought Catherine's behavior was extreme, so he reported to the police. That's why the officers knew our whereabouts and came to get us. Catherine had also been asked to come to the police station. She sat on a sofa glaring at me, seemingly clueless about why she was there. "Why do I have to be here? I have a bad knee, you know." "If Bob was here, this wouldn't be happening," Catherine complained. But this entire situation was a result of Bob asking my uncle for help. In discussions with the police, there was a high likelihood that the events might have legal implications, hence I was advised to consider hiring an attorney. An attorney? That's an overreaction. I just locked the door, that's all. I didn't do anything else, Catherine defended herself. "Do you even realize what you've done? You threw Emma and a little child out in torrential rain. That's not something forgivable." My uncle stood up for us and stated that in fact, I was the rightful owner of the house. "That's impossible. Bob is the head of the household. He's the rightful owner. Now that he's not here, it should be mine." Catherine insisted. Catherine was under the impression that Bob was the owner, but she was mistaken. Actually, my uncle runs a real estate business and got us a great deal on a condo. Bob had recommended that the property be put under my name. I was indifferent at the time, but now I'm glad I heeded Bob's advice. Later on, following my uncle's advice, I decided to hire a lawyer. The lawyer said it would be challenging to evict Catherine. Therefore, the best course of action might be to place her in a care facility. Upon hearing this, I immediately called Bob to explain the situation. Bob hadn't anticipated the issue would escalate this much and said he'd like to return from Japan to discuss it properly. He also said he was considering placing Catherine in a facility, unaware of all this. Catherine, despite being at the police station, casually snacked on some crackers. I couldn't return to the house with Catherine, so I decided to take shelter at my parents' place until Bob returned. Bob would be back in a week, giving me time to ponder our next steps. If Bob wouldn't support me, then divorce seemed like the only option. Regret filled me, wishing I had sought advice sooner. A week later, Bob returned from Europe and was at the house with Catherine. So I moved back home from my parents' place. Given the urgency of his return, Bob had to go back to Europe soon. He could only stay in Japan for a few days, so we needed to discuss our next moves. I've heard some things from Emma's uncle. Is all of that true? Bob asked. It's all lies. I haven't done anything. Emma's plotting something to evict me. Catherine stubbornly refused to admit any wrongdoing. She even claimed I was scheming against her. Bob, who should have been on my side, seemed to want to consider Catherine's perspective. I get it. So, do you have any evidence to prove Emma's plotting something? Evidence? Of course not, Catherine insisted. Emma, do you have any evidence? Bob turned to me. To be honest, I've been so busy with work, I haven't been able to keep an eye on things. I'm not sure who to believe, I admitted. I handed Bob something I had with me. What's this? He asked. I gave Bob a voice recorder I had been using. It contained recordings of Catherine, who not only evicted me, but also often berated me. When Bob played it, he heard Catherine's voice saying things like, "Such a worthless wife. I wonder why he even married you." Hearing this, Catherine quickly began to defend herself. This is taken out of context. Everyone has their moments, right? I was just frustrated at that time. But it was just this once, even as Catherine claimed this, a barrage of recorded verbal abuses played from the voice recorder. There were countless instances, and even some which weren't captured on the device. Bob's hand holding the voice recorder trembled with tension and anger. Meanwhile, Catherine looked guilt-ridden. "Mom, what is this about?" Bob asked, but Catherine remained silent. "If you won't answer, then I assume this is all true. If so, I need to protect Emma and Lily. You understand that, right?" Bob said. I had never seen Bob angry in all the years we've been together. Catherine, probably seeing this side of Bob for the first time too, looked frightened and shrunk back, unable to say a word. Afterward, there were several discussions until Bob's return to Europe. I asserted that I could no longer live with Catherine, considering Lily's presence and not wanting a repeat of this event. Bob seemed to share my sentiment, leaning towards placing Catherine in a care facility. However, Catherine strongly opposed the idea, complicating the discussions. Regardless, I've decided to sell the house. "So, you can't stay here anymore. If you don't want the facility, you'll need to find another place," I told Catherine. "How dare you decide this on your own? I won't allow you to sell the house." Catherine resisted the idea of selling the house, but it was a tough request to accommodate. That's because Lily and I had decided to move to Europe. Bob regretted not being more present for his family and wanted to be there for us moving forward. Although I was hesitant about living abroad, knowing Bob would be with us reassured me. Besides, Lily is only 2, and it would be good for her to practice her communication skills in Europe. Therefore, selling the condo, which still had a mortgage, was the only option. If we left it as it was, Catherine would have to cover the mortgage, considering she's on a fixed income. She doesn't have that kind of money given her future prospects. Someone should be around to assist her. Despite our efforts, Catherine was adamant about not moving into a facility. So we had to forcefully place her in one. I'm sorry, but I've got to head back to Europe. Could you handle any procedures required here? Bob asked before heading back. With help from those around me, I managed to finalize Catherine's admission into the facility. The facility staff kept me updated on Catherine's condition, but it seems she's not doing well. It'd be one thing if she were just down, but apparently she's been giving people there a hard time. Before heading to Europe, I went to visit her to see how she was doing, but she lashed out at me, saying, "What's the big idea? Why have you locked me up in this place?" She even vented her frustrations on the staff, complaining, "How can you expect anyone to eat this food? Isn't there something more flavorful? This isn't nearly enough. The beds are uncomfortable, and other residents keep making snide remarks. I'm going to lose my mind in here." When I apologized to the staff, they were very understanding. "It's all good," one of the staff members assured me. "We see this kind of behavior often. Just leave it to us. We'll keep you in the loop. And if anything comes up, we'll give you a ring. So don't you worry." Despite all the harassment I got from her since we used to live together, I couldn't help but feel worried as I headed to Europe. Upon arriving in Paris, Bob met me at the airport, and we headed to the apartment we'd rented. They say rents in Paris are higher than in Texas, but since Bob's company gives him an allowance for housing, we were lucky to find a spacious and affordable place. The neighbors in our building are super friendly and have been very kind to me, even though I don't speak French fluently. Yesterday, a neighbor shared some wine and cheese with me. In return, I gave them some mac and cheese. Meanwhile, I'm gradually learning French along with my daughter Lily. I know there's a limit to self-study, so I've also enrolled in a language school. There are a lot of Americans there, many of whom, like me, are new to France. I've made some friends there and am really enjoying my life in Paris. Back in the States, I had to always be concerned about Catherine, which often prevented me from fully enjoying outings with friends. But here, I can indulge in leisurely lunches just the way I like. The only concern right now is Lily. She's still too young for kindergarten. Kids here usually start kindergarten the year they turn 5, so I hope she picks up enough French by then. Fortunately, Lily seems to be catching on pretty quickly. I'm thinking of getting a job once Lily starts preschool. Bob says he's okay with me staying at home, but living in Paris has made me want to explore more opportunities. Seeing how ambitious and confident people are here has ignited something within me. I've become friends with a waitress at a nearby cafe, and she hinted there might be a job for me there. That cafe isn't only popular among the American community, many of their customers are also learning English. There might be challenges ahead, but since coming to France, Bob and I have been communicating much better. I feel more confident in expressing my feelings, and I believe no matter what happens, we'll face it as a family. Right now, I feel happier than I've ever been in my life.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa, a 27-year-old marketing executive at Thompson & Associates. 2 years ago, my life took an unexpected turn when I met James Miller at a corporate event. He was charming, successful, and seemed like the perfect match. Our relationship moved quickly. Coffee dates turned into dinner dates, and before I knew it, we were spending every weekend together. "You're different from anyone I've ever met," James would say, holding my hand across the table. His words made my heart flutter. Little did I know what I was really getting into. Everything was perfect until I met his mother, Eleanor Miller. She arrived unannounced at one of our dinner dates, dressed in designer clothes and wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, so this is the girl you've been seeing." "I pictured someone different," she said, her words dripping with barely concealed judgment. My best friend Teresa noticed it right away. "Girl, did you see how she looked at you when you mentioned your promotion? Like you just said you worked at a fast food joint," she said later. "Maybe she's just protective," I defend, though Teresa always shook her head. "No, honey, that woman is marking her territory." James's sister, Sarah, was a different story. She'd pull me aside at family gatherings, squeezing my arm reassuringly. "Don't let Mom get to you. She does this to everyone." But the red flags were hard to ignore. Eleanor would forget to set a place for me at family dinners or conveniently exclude me from family photos. When I brought it up to James, he'd shrug. Baby, that's just how mom is. She'll warm up to you eventually. Things escalated when James proposed. Eleanor immediately took over the engagement party planning. No, dear, she said, brushing off my suggestions. You couldn't possibly understand our family traditions. I'll handle everything. But I thought we could plan it together, I ventured. Oh, sweetie, you're so busy with your little job. Let me take care of it, she replied with that condescending smile. James, standing awkwardly nearby, avoided eye contact. Mom knows best, he muttered. Even Sarah tried to warn me. She did this with James' ex too, started small, then got worse. Teresa, as usual, didn't hold back. Are you seriously letting her run your engagement party? Girl, this is just the beginning. I watched helplessly as Eleanor took over every detail. The venue, the guest list, the menu. She even tried to choose my dress. The blue one makes you look more appropriate, she said, her tone saccharine but her eyes cold. Now, with the engagement party a week away, I'm watching Eleanor transform what should be our celebration into her show. James insists I'm overreacting, but Teresa and Sarah see it too. Something tells me this party is going to be unforgettable, just not in the way I'd hoped. Just remember, Teresa told me yesterday you're marrying James, not his mother. But lately, I wonder if that's really true, because it feels like I'm signing up for both, and Eleanor Miller is making it very clear who's in charge. The engagement party was a spectacle straight out of Eleanor's playbook. Crystal chandeliers, extravagant floral arrangements, and her high society friends filling every corner of her mansion. I felt out of place the moment I walked in, especially when I saw she'd rearranged the seating chart to put me at a corner table, far from James. Darling, you understand, don't you? The Andersons simply must sit with James. They're such important business connections. Throughout the night, Eleanor made sure everyone knew who was in control. She interrupted my conversations with guests, redirecting them to James' achievements. Isn't he just perfect? And to think he's building his empire all by himself, she'd say, emphasizing by himself while glancing at me dismissively. The breaking point came during her speech. I was standing near the dessert table when she approached, coffee cup in hand. Mid-sentence, she began to talk about welcoming new family members who understand our standards. The silence was deafening when Eleanor suddenly tripped, spilling hot coffee all over my cream-colored dress. The liquid seeped into the fabric, leaving a dark stain as I stood there, mortified. Oh my, look what you made me do, Eleanor gasped theatrically, clutching her chest as though she were the victim. Quick, clean this up before it stains my imported carpet. I froze, the coffee dripping down my dress. On your knees, dear, she instructed, her voice loud enough to carry across the room. That's the only way to properly clean it. James, darling, get her some towels, Eleanor demanded. James stepped forward hesitantly, his face pale. Mom, maybe we should. James, my carpet. Do you know how much it costs? Lisa needs to clean up her mess. I turned to James, silently pleading for him to intervene, but he simply handed me the towels, avoiding my eyes. It's easier if we just do what she says, he whispered. From across the room, I caught Sarah subtly recording the scene on her phone. Then Teresa pushed through the crowd, grabbing my arm. We're leaving. Now. But the party. It's over. For you, Teresa said firmly, steering me out the door. As we drove away, my phone buzzed. Sarah had sent me screenshots of texts between James and Eleanor from the past month. She's not right for you, darling. Did you see how she embarrassed us at the country club? Mom, Lisa's trying her best. Best isn't good enough for a Miller. Remember Caroline? She knew how to behave in our circles. The messages painted a chilling picture. Eleanor had sabotaged the venue booking by pretending to be my wedding planner. She told the caterer we wanted to go in a different direction. She had even contacted my boss under the guise of concern about my work hours. Another text from Sarah came in. I found something else. Mom's been meeting with Caroline. She's trying to get her back with James. Teresa tightened her grip on the steering wheel. You need to see this for what it is. She humiliated you in front of everyone, and James let it happen. As if on cue, my phone lit up again. James's message read, Mom's upset you left early. She says you're being dramatic about a little accident. Maybe you should apologize. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about coffee on a dress. This was Eleanor showing me exactly who she was, and James showing me exactly who he wasn't. The next morning, I met Patricia, James's ex-fiancée, over coffee in a quiet diner. She stirred her drink nervously. "I should have warned you when I heard about the engagement," she said. "Eleanor didn't just break us up, she systematically destroyed my life." Patricia shared stories eerily similar to mine. She made me clean spilled wine at their Christmas party, called me a gold digger at our engagement party. By the end, I lost a promotion and had to move cities. Sarah joined us, dropping a folder on the table. "You need to see this," she said grimly. "Mom doesn't just control James emotionally, she's the silent partner in his business. She funds everything through family loans. He can't make a single decision without her approval." Back at work, the fallout began. Clients canceled meetings. My boss called me in. "Someone's expressed concerns about your reliability. Care to explain these calls about your unstable behavior during work hours?" Teresa helped me document everything. The phone calls, the rumors, the sabotage. "Look at this pattern," she pointed out. "She's done the same thing to Sarah's college boyfriend, James's high school girlfriend, even their cousin's fiancé. Anyone who threatens her control gets eliminated." I confronted James at his office, presenting the evidence. "These are ridiculous accusations," he snapped. "Mom's looking out for me. You're just jealous of our close relationship." "Close relationship? She's suffocating you, James. She controls your business, your relationships, your entire life." "At least she's family," he retorted. "You're just someone who clearly doesn't understand our world." Later that night, Sarah called, her voice shaking. "I found something while going through Mom's office. She's been forging signatures on business documents. The Miller family business isn't as clean as everyone thinks." Eleanor's next move was bold. She showed up at my office, uninvited. "I'm willing to forget this unfortunate situation if you walk away quietly," she said with a razor-sharp smile. "Otherwise, I have friends in many places. Your career, your reputation, such fragile things." That night, I spread everything out on my dining table. Documentation, testimonies, and proof of Eleanor's manipulation. Teresa sat beside me, flipping through the pages. "Girl, you know what you have to do," she said. "You're right," I replied. "I deserve better than this." I drafted a message to James. "I won't be another victim of your mother's games. I choose myself. The ring will be returned through my lawyer. Don't contact me again." Sarah sent me one last text. "You're doing the right thing. I wish I was as strong as you." That night, I stared at my reflection in the mirror and saw something I hadn't seen in months myself. Not Eleanor's puppet, not James's conflicted fiancé. Just me, the woman who refused to kneel any longer. Teresa hugged me tightly. "This isn't the end, you know. It's your new beginning." For the first time since the coffee incident, I smiled. Because this time, the mess I was cleaning up wasn't on my knees, it was on my terms. I didn't need to do anything else. Karma had already started its work. Sarah's video of the coffee incident went viral within our social circle, capturing Eleanor's calculated cruelty in crystal clear detail. Her cold commands, my humiliation, the shocked faces of the guests, all laid bare. "Did you see how Eleanor treated that poor girl?" People whispered. I always knew something was off about her. The whispers turned into roars when Eleanor's business rivals got wind of her fraudulent practices. Mr. Richardson, a longtime competitor, reached out to me during a chance meeting. "You weren't the first person she tried to destroy," he said with a grim smile, "but you'll definitely be the last." James's business partners started pulling out, one after another. Teresa, with her connections in finance, kept me updated. "They're discovering years of Eleanor's interference in deals," she reported. "Your mother's signature is on documents she had no authority to sign," one partner said. "This isn't just unethical, it's illegal." Then came my own sweet victory. Remember my little job Eleanor loved to dismiss? Well, guess who just got headhunted by Miller Enterprises' biggest competitor? "We've been watching your work," my new CEO told me during the interview, "and we value people who stand up for themselves." One afternoon, Sarah called me, laughing through tears. "Mom just got uninvited from the charity board she's chaired for 15 years. They said her recent behavior doesn't align with their values." From a safe distance, I watched Eleanor's carefully constructed world crumble. The country club suddenly had no tables available when she called. Her bridge group disbanded. Even her gardening circle found a new leader. James, of course, tried to reach out. He showed up at my new office one afternoon, looking disheveled and remorseful. "I was wrong," he said, his voice shaking. "I see it all now, what she did to you, to us. Please, can we try again?" I looked him in the eye, calm and resolute. "The coffee stains came out of my dress," I told him. "But the memory of you standing there, doing nothing, that's permanent." Sarah finally moved out of the family mansion. We meet for coffee every week now. Real coffee, with no hidden agendas or power plays. "You gave me the courage to break free," she told me last week. "I'm starting my own business, away from family money." Yesterday, I saw Eleanor at a restaurant. She was sitting alone, her designer outfit still impeccable, but her table conspicuously empty. Our eyes met briefly. I smiled, not out of cruelty, but because I felt nothing. No anger. No fear. No need for revenge. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. Eleanor wanted me on my knees, but I rose higher than she ever imagined. And the view from up here, absolutely perfect.
My girlfriend plans to keep her affair baby then one day. My girlfriend cheated on me with a guy from work who is 30 years old. They even went on a 7-day vacation together. After she told me about cheating, she begged for forgiveness, and we started going to counseling. She blocked him from contacting her and showed me she wanted to fix our relationship. 3 months later, things seemed good between us. I even told her I wanted to have a baby with her someday, but then she looked really worried. When I asked her why, she said she was pregnant, and it was from the guy she cheated with. I was really mad and asked her to have an abortion or give the baby up for adoption, but she wants to keep the baby and wants me to be the dad. I want to be a dad too, but I wanted it to be my own child, not someone else's. Should I break up with her, or should I try to convince her to have an abortion? Additional context. We've been together for 4 years, starting as roommates because she needed help with rent. The affair lasted 2 months. She told me about it after a working trip. The guy she cheated with told her to leave me for him, but she got scared and ended things with him. She confessed everything to both our families as a way to make things right. Update 1. So, yesterday I asked for advice on Reddit because something was bothering me. Someone suggested I check other social networks my girlfriend might be using. So I took their advice and looked through her laptop. The coworker she was supposedly seeing, who's 30 years old, isn't real. It's actually my younger brother, who's 24, and their affair has been going on for over 2 months. They've been mocking me, making fun of my body and my insecurities behind my back. They've been doing all sorts of things in my house while I was working as a cook. But that's not even the worst part. During that supposed 7-day vacation, they actually got married. And the worst part is, my parents and her family knew about it. They were sending photos to each other. I found out all of this by going through her chats. She hadn't added my brother, but I'm sure it's him because of the photos and some things only he would know. I waited for her to come back from work. I was feeling, and still am, shattered and really hurt. When she got back, I immediately asked her about it. She just smiled and confessed that she was tired of pretending, that she only stayed with me until the lease was over, and that the child she's carrying is my brother's. I gathered my things and left. Now, I'm staying with my older sister. She's just as stunned and hurt by what happened as I am. She's been calling our parents, brother, and girlfriend all day. Only my parents have tried to reach out to me, but I haven't answered. I decided to cut off contact with my parents and brother. Update 2. Hi. It's been 3 days since everything blew up. I've been feeling really sad and depressed lately, but being with my sister is helping me feel a bit better. For those who are just tuning in, my girlfriend cheated on me and secretly married my brother, then she left me. She's pregnant with his child, and both our families knew about it. I've got some questions to address. 1. Did you sleep with your girlfriend after she confessed the affair? No, I didn't. But I did sleep with her when she was already married to my brother. I still don't understand why they did that. 2. Does the rest of your family know? No, but I've already told them. Even my ex-girlfriend's family knows. The only ones who knew before were my parents and hers. 3. Does your sister know? No, she's been kind of an outsider in our family. She's a lesbian, so my family didn't really accept her. But she's always been there for me. She's my best friend. I've been staying with my sister for these past 3 days, and I've been feeling really depressed. But she's been there for me the whole time, and we even played some cyberpunk together. I had to quit my job because my sister doesn't feel comfortable with me handling knives right now, especially considering my past suicide attempt. She told me that my parents want to meet with me to explain everything, but she made it clear that I didn't have to if I didn't want to. However, I do want to know everything, so I agreed to meet with them this Friday. When I went back to my old place to grab some things, I found my brother there with my ex-girlfriend. My sister, who came with me just in case, almost punched him. He's been rejected by most of the family, including my parents. So that's the update. My family is still falling apart, and I'm gearing up to confront my parents. Update 4. So, yesterday I decided to meet with my parents along with my sister. I had everything prepared, questions to ask, a recording device, because I wanted some answers before cutting off contact with them. Some people here advised me not to go, and I probably should have listened to them. When we got there, my parents were upset that my sister came along. I told them they didn't have the right to dictate that. Then they tried to offer some sort of apology. But it didn't really sound like one. I went ahead and asked them my first question. How long have you known about this? They went silent, but then my father said they were giving my brother and ex-girlfriend their own house to do as they pleased. Can you believe it? I wasn't just hurt. I was furious. I always knew my brother was the favorite, but this just made me even angrier. I kept asking them questions, and I found out that my ex-girlfriend's dad was the first to find out about the affair. He then contacted my parents, and all 4 of them met with my brother and my ex-girlfriend. They all came up with this idea of a blissful lie, as my dad called it. They didn't want to hurt me, but they thought my brother and ex-girlfriend would be happier together since they had betrayed me in the first place. I was really angry about this. My sister was furious too, and she started yelling at my parents. Then my brother showed up. My sister and I went quiet, and my mom started talking about trying to mend things and being there as an aunt and uncle for the baby. But my sister was angry and said she wouldn't be there for that kid. Then my brother said something like, "This will be the only child you'll have related by blood." My sister went silent, and I punched him without even thinking. It was the first time I ever punched someone, and honestly, I couldn't be happier about it. My brother started bleeding from his nose, and my parents started yelling at me. I just told them that they had lost 2 children, and then my sister and I left. Now I'm here at my sister's house, and my hand hurts from punching my brother, but I'm glad I stood up for myself and my sister. I'm planning to start therapy soon, and I'm thinking about joining the gym too. As I'm writing this, I realize my negative thoughts are becoming less frequent, so I think that's really good news. It's been a week since my confrontation with my parents, and nothing has changed. I've just been feeling really low lately, lacking energy and feeling tired all the time. I've seen my post on other sites, and most people are making fun of me and calling me a bad writer. It's frustrating because this isn't fiction. It's my real life. I'm not sure how to prove it to them. Should I post images of the texts I found? I'm just exhausted. A quick update. My brother and my parents have filed charges against me for breaking my brother's nose. So that's another blow to deal with. I'm trying to gather evidence to see if I can sue them for everything they've put me through. I'll update soon with more information. Thank you to everyone who sent kind messages. I'm still feeling down, but as Elton John said, I'm still standing. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you too. Before I give you the update, I need to address something. I've noticed that my story has made its way to YouTube. My sister informed me about it. But unfortunately, some details in those videos are completely made up. For instance, they said I couldn't impregnate anyone because I was sterile, which is just ridiculous. And another video mentioned something about my ex-girlfriend having an addiction, along with some made-up legal stuff. I want to make it clear that I don't appreciate these false details being spread about me or anyone else involved. On another note, I want to express my gratitude to everyone for their comments and support during this time. I know I said I would update regularly, but things have been pretty hectic. I've even had the chance to talk to people from around the world. It's something I didn't expect, but it makes me happy to know that I have people who care about me. Update. My sister and I have decided on a new surname for ourselves, Moreno. In Spain, it's a tradition for bastards to have a nickname based on physical traits. And since we both have black hair, we chose Moreno. I've been discussing my court case with my lawyer and my sister. We're all prepared, but my lawyer suggested gathering more evidence. So I'm reaching out to some family members to back me up. As for the holidays, they've been a mix of sadness and relaxation. I spent 2 weeks in the city of Vigo with my sister and her girlfriend. It was the first Christmas without my parents and my brother, and my ex too, although I've always spent Christmas with my family. On Christmas Eve, we were with my sister's girlfriend's family, who are from Vigo, and I felt a bit out of place. Not because of them, they were welcoming, but I just felt numb and jealous of their relationship. My sister noticed and tried to cheer me up, but I felt bad for making her worry. That night, I didn't go out to celebrate. I stayed at my sister's girlfriend's house and watched TV. The funny part is, I made friends with the grandparents. They were really kind to me, and after hearing about my situation, they gave me some great advice and made me feel better about myself. On New Year's Eve, I was planning to stay in like I did on Christmas Eve, but my sister convinced me to go out with her, her girlfriend, and her girlfriend's cousins for dinner and to watch the countdown. Once again, I felt a bit out of place, but one of my sister's girlfriend's cousins was really chatty with me. She had just ended a toxic relationship, and my sister kept trying to get us to talk. It made me a bit anxious at first, but after the countdown, we ended up kissing. I told her I'm not ready for a relationship, and she understands. We're just friends, really. I mean, we only met on Christmas Eve, and we've only been talking for 5 days at this point. We got back to my sister's house yesterday, and I still feel a bit numb about everything. It's been a strange Christmas, but kind of heartwarming too. That's all for now. Sorry for not having much else to say. I was born into a world where my family name gives me lots of advantages. My dad is a big shot in a company you've probably heard about. But don't think my life is all fancy and glamorous. I'm not the kind of person who spends all day shopping for expensive clothes and drinking champagne. I've always stayed true to myself, even though my family has a lot of money. I've chosen a different path in life. I do things like helping out people who need it and living a normal, down-to-earth life. That's just who I am, Jessica, without any fancy titles. One night, my friend Sarah convinced me to go out with her. We ended up in a dive bar downtown. Sarah was all excited, trying to set me up with some guy she met online. But then, another guy named Alex showed up. He wasn't the guy Sarah had in mind, but there was something about him that caught my attention. He seemed relaxed and friendly, not trying to impress anyone with fancy clothes or big talk. We started chatting, and it felt natural, like we'd known each other for ages. Alex mentioned he worked as a manager somewhere, nothing too flashy. But he talked about his job with such excitement that it made me interested. "You really love your job, huh?" I asked, taking a sip of my beer. "Absolutely," Alex replied, leaning in. "Every day is a challenge, but hey, I'm not here to bore you with work talk." "What about you?" Sarah mentioned charity work. I shrugged, trying to play it down. "Yeah, a bit of this and that, just trying to do my part, you know." "That's cool, really cool," he said sincerely, not trying to impress me, but genuinely interested. As the night went on, Alex and I stuck together, chatting about anything and everything. It was nice talking to someone who wasn't trying to sell me something or brag about their possessions. As the night wound down, Alex seemed like he was building up to something. "Hey Jessica, I know this is kind of forward, but would you want to grab dinner with me sometime, just us?" he asked. I felt a mix of surprise and excitement. "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'd like that." On the way home, Sarah was all giggles, saying, "I told you so." I just smiled, thinking about the evening. Alex was a breath of fresh air in my often stale world. Soon, going out turned into hanging out at each other's places, mostly mine because Alex's roommates were a handful. One evening, while lounging on the couch after eating some average takeout pizza, Alex turned to me with a serious look but a light tone. "Jessica, how do you feel about making this a more permanent arrangement?" he asked, crumbs still on his mouth. I raised an eyebrow. "Are you proposing we split a Netflix account or something?" He chuckled, brushing off the crumbs. "Well, I was thinking more like a life together. But hey, we can start with Netflix. The simplicity of it, the straightforwardness, no grand gestures or dramatic moments, just us being ourselves, felt right. Alex, if you're asking what I think you're asking, yes, 1,000 times yes." And just like that, with the smell of cheap pizza in the air as our witness, we decided to get married. It happened quickly, but we were sure. But when you know, you know. Telling our families was the next hurdle. My parents, well, they've always been about the as long as you're happy mantra, but this was putting it to the test. Dad with his business empire and Mom the socialite, they had visions of me settling down with someone more in our circle. I broke the news over dinner, the fancy kind where you're not sure which fork to use for the salad. "Mom, Dad, I'm getting married to Alex," I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. Dad paused, fork midair. "Alex, the manager chap." "Well, that's quick," he said. Mom simply smiled, a bit too tightly. "Dear, are you sure? This is rather sudden, isn't it?" But I was firm. "Yes, I'm sure. He's amazing, and we're really happy together." Their skepticism was palpable, but so was their love. "Well, if he makes you happy, darling," Mom conceded, and Dad nodded in agreement. Alex's folks were a whole different story. We went over to their place, a cozy little house that always seemed to smell like fresh cookies or something equally comforting. Judy and Martin were as down-to-earth as they come, and they welcomed me like I'd always been a part of the family. "Alex tells us you're setting a date," Martin asked, passing me a plate of those infamous cookies. "Yes, we're thinking sooner rather than later." "Small ceremony, nothing fancy," I replied, trying to gauge their reaction. Judy beamed. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. We're just thrilled for you both." Their warmth was enveloping, a stark contrast to the cautious optimism of my own parents. It was clear right from the get-go that our worlds were different, but the common ground was the genuine happiness for me and Alex. Planning the wedding, we were on the same page. Keep it simple. Keep it us. A small ceremony, close friends and family, and an open bar because, as Alex put it, if we're doing this, we're making sure everyone's having a good time. And that's how it went down. A swift engagement, not because we were rushing. Living with Alex started off just as I'd hoped for and more. We were like two peas in a pod, making our little corner of the world in that cozy modern apartment I had rented. It was ours, filled with love, laughter, and a ton of takeout containers because neither of us were winning any awards in the kitchen. It wasn't long before I started noticing how Alex's parents, Judy and Martin, had this way of dropping hints about things they liked or needed whenever they came over. At first, it was subtle, almost cute. "Oh, Jessica, that's a lovely coffee maker." "It must make mornings a breeze," Judy would say, eyeing our shiny new appliance with a gleam in her eye. Or, "Martin, this sofa is just divine. Our old one's been giving me a right pain in the back, you know," Martin would comment. Wanting to be the good daughter-in-law, I'd surprise them with gifts here and there. A coffee maker for Judy, a comfortable new sofa for their living room, and so on. Their initial reactions were always the same, a mix of surprise and a little bit of guilt. "Oh, Jessica, you shouldn't have. This is too much," Judy would exclaim, her hands fluttering to her chest. "But you know, humans are funny creatures. Give them an inch and they'll take a mile." Those initial protests faded away, replaced by a growing list of subtle hints that were about as subtle as a brick through a window. Dinner at your folks' place was lovely, dear. Did you see that new TV they have? Crystal clear. Ours is practically ancient. Alex would relay his parents' latest comments, oblivious to the change in their tone. One evening, after I had just dropped a not-so-small fortune on a fancy new TV for them, Alex and I were curled up on the couch, my head resting in his lap. They really love the TV, babe. You're amazing. You know that, he said, his fingers running through my hair. I sighed, the weight of their expectations starting to press down on me. Alex, do they expect us to keep doing this? It's getting a bit much, don't you think? He paused, his hand stopping mid-stroke. What do you mean? They're just happy, that's all. Happy or taking advantage? I pushed back, sitting up to look at him. It feels like we're their personal shopping service. Alex was taken aback, his brow furrowing. They're not like that, Jess. They're just not used to nice things, that's all. But where does it end, Alex? It's like they've got a taste for it now. And they're not looking back, I argued, frustration creeping into my voice. The conversation ended with an uneasy truce, but it was clear we were on different pages. Judy and Martin's gratitude had morphed into entitlement, and it was putting a strain on me. I loved Alex, but I wasn't about to become a bottomless ATM for his parents. When my dad's company hit the skids, it felt like the rug was yanked out from under my feet. That cushy life, poof, gone. And with it, the whole dynamic of my relationship took a nosedive. The shift wasn't gradual. It was like flipping a switch from daylight to darkness. I had to break the news to Alex and his folks. Let me tell you, that was a conversation I've been dreading. Listen up, things are going to get tight. Dad's company's tanking, and, well, we're in for a rough ride, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But the tremor was there, betraying my nerves. Alex's reaction was a gut punch. You're kidding me, right? What do you mean things are going to get tight? You're telling me we can't live like we used to because of your dad's mess. His words were like ice, and for a second, I wished the floor would swallow me whole. Judy and Martin's faces were no better, their disappointment barely masked. This is quite the situation you put us in, Jessica, Martin added, his tone dripping with reproach. And just like that, the warmth and camaraderie we once shared evaporated, replaced by this cold expectation that somehow I was to blame for my family's financial downturn. Moving in with them was held up as a temporary solution. Our once independent life got swapped for a guest room that felt more like a cell in the house of two people who clearly saw us as a nuisance. The atmosphere was charged with tension, every day a reminder that I'd somehow failed them. We're cutting back on everything because of this, Judy would remind me, her voice sharp as she served dinner that was a far cry from the lavish meals we used to enjoy. And Martin, always with a comment on saving costs. Make sure those lights are off. We're not running a charity here. But Alex, he was the hardest to bear. The man I married seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone who saw me as a letdown. Can't you do something? Talk to your dad. It's like you don't even care we're living like this. He'd snap, anger flaring over the smallest things. Our conversations, once easy and filled with future plans, now were minefields, every word. Every word I said was a potential trigger for another outburst. I thought marrying you meant security, not this struggle. He'd throw at me during arguments, his words slicing through me. It was clear we weren't just dealing with financial stress. This was a test of our relationship, a revelation of true colors under pressure. I was stuck in the middle, battling the disillusionment from my husband and his parents while grappling with my own sense of failure. Judy's birthday dinner was supposed to be this cozy family thing at some upscale restaurant, a break from the constant tension, but it turned into the showdown of a lifetime. I should have seen it coming, the way things have been going at their place. We're all sitting there, menu in hand, and I'm trying to keep the peace, just blend into the background. But that plan got torpedoed the second orders started flying. Alex, with this grin that made my skin crawl, goes, "Let's get the steak and the lobster for us." And he throws a look my way, 1 part smug, 2 parts cruel. Jessica can do with the soup of the day, Got to save where we can, right? They all laugh like it's the best joke they've heard in ages. Judy adds her 2 cents, absolutely. Can't have Jessica overspending now, can we? I felt this flush of heat, not embarrassment, but pure fury. Really? Soup? What's this? Some kind of sick joke? I snapped back, my voice sharper than I intended. Oh, come on, Jessica. It's just a bit of fun, Alex said, that smirk still plastered on his face. Fun? This is your idea of fun? When the chips are down, you just show how petty you really are. I can't believe I fell for your act, I exclaimed. You could hear a pin drop. The whole restaurant was watching now. The awkwardness off the charts. I didn't sit back down. Keep your fancy dishes and your pathetic jokes. I'm out, I said, standing up so fast my chair nearly toppled over, the noise echoing and turning more heads our way. Alex reached out, trying to play the peacemaker. Jessica, don't. Let's not make this a scene. A scene? You think I care about making a scene? After that stunt. This is about respect, something you clearly have none of, I said, yanking my arm free and making for the exit. The weight of their stares on my back, stepping out into the night, felt like breaking out of prison. My phone was blowing up. Alex no doubt trying to do damage control. I ignored it, my mind made up. I drove back to their place, a storm of emotions brewing inside. How had things gone so sour? Alex and I were a team, or so I thought. But that dinner, it was a slap in the face, a wake-up call I couldn't ignore. Back at the house, I packed my bags in record time, each folded shirt a reminder of the life I was leaving behind. It wasn't just about leaving a place. It was about leaving a relationship that had shown its true colors. I turned off my phone, cutting off the barrage of messages. The silence was eerie but welcome. That night wasn't just the end of a disastrous dinner. It was the close of a chapter I had no interest in revisiting. After the disaster that was Judy's birthday dinner, I found myself driving to my parents' house. The night was quiet, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. By the time I pulled up to their driveway, my decision was made. I needed sanctuary, yes, but more than that, I needed advice, something only my dad could offer. Walking into the house, the familiarity of it all was both comforting and jarring. Mom was asleep, but Dad was up, sitting in his study surrounded by papers that seemed less important the moment I stepped in. Jessica, what are you doing here at this hour? Is everything okay? He stood up, concern etching his face. I took a deep breath, the events of the evening pouring out of me in a flood. I told him about the dinner, about Alex and his parents, and how I felt like I'd been reduced to nothing but a source of income for them. Dad listened in silence, his expression hardening with every word. When I finished, he sighed, a sound that carried years of experience and a hint of sorrow. Jessica, I saw this coming. I just hoped I was wrong, he finally said, his voice steady but filled with empathy. How could I have been so blind, Dad? I thought I thought we were different, I said, feeling the weight of my naivety. He walked over, putting an arm around my shoulders. You wanted to see the best in him, in them. There's no fault in that. But people show their true colors in tough times. It's a hard lesson, but an important one. I nodded, the reality of his words sinking in. But what do I do now? I can't go back there. You'll stay here for starters. As for the rest, we'll figure it out together, he assured me, his confidence a balm to my frayed nerves. Then he shared something that took me by surprise. You know, the company situation isn't as dire as it seems. We're actually on the verge of a breakthrough. It was a strategic move, a way to weed out the opportunists. I stared at him, stunned. So, you mean to say we're not broke? He chuckled, a sound that was part relief, part amusement. Far from it. But it was important to see who would stick around when the chips were down. Unfortunately, Alex and his family showed their true selves. The revelation was a lot to process. My anger towards Alex and his parents was now mixed with a sense of vindication. They had revealed their true motives, and in doing so, had freed me from a future of manipulation and deceit. Dad, I don't know whether to be relieved or furious, I admitted, the emotions battling inside me. Be both, it's okay. But remember, this experience has taught you something invaluable about people and their intentions. Use it, learn from it, he advised, grounding me. Walking up to Judy and Martin's house the next day felt like heading into the lion's den. I was ready for a showdown, but nothing could have prepared me for the cold reception I got. Alex was standing there, divorce papers in hand, with a look that could only be described as triumphant disdain. Here you go. Let's get this over with, he said, practically shoving the papers at me. His parents were hovering behind, barely containing their glee. Finally getting rid of the freeloader, Judy snickered, and Martin nodded in agreement, a smug smile plastered across his face. Alex joined in. Yes, turns out you're just an ordinary dummy without your daddy's money. Thought you'd cry. But guess what? We don't need a tearful mess around here. Their words stung, but not in the way they expected. I felt a bizarre mix of anger and liberation. I looked at the papers, then at them, and without a word, signed where I needed to. As I did, their smiles widened, thinking they'd won. But I had the last laugh. Pulling out a newspaper from my bag, I slapped it down on the table with more force than necessary. Thought you might find this interesting, I said, my voice dripping with unrestrained satisfaction. The headlines screamed about my dad's company making a monumental comeback, profits soaring higher than ever. Watching their faces drain of color was a sight I'd pay to see again. Judy and Martin's smugness vanished, replaced by shock, then desperation. Alex's arrogance crumbled, leaving him looking like a child who just lost his favorite toy. Judy suddenly switched gears, stepping towards me with arms wide open. Oh, my sweet girl. It's all a big misunderstanding. Let's hug it out. Martin, ever the opportunist, chimed in. Let's not rush things. Sit down, have a coffee, and we can talk this through. And Alex? Oh, Alex, he was the picture of regret. I was wrong, okay? We can fix this. I want to make everything right, please. Their sudden change of heart was almost comical. Almost. I couldn't help but laugh, a deep, hearty sound that felt cleansing. You three are something else, you know that? But here's a news flash for you. I'm done with the lies, the manipulation, and the so-called family that only values me for my bank account. I turned to leave, their protests and pleas fading into the background. They called after me, a mix of desperation and disbelief in their voices. But I didn't look back, not this time. After the spectacle at Judy and Martin's house, I was done. Not just with them, but with the whole sorry saga that had become my life. I needed a fresh start, a clean slate. So, I took some time holed up at my folks' place, getting my head and heart back in the game. One afternoon, a couple of weeks after the divorce was finalized, I was out for coffee with Sarah, my ever-supportive friend who had been there through it all. Girl, you look like a weight's been lifted, she commented, sipping her latte. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. You have no idea. It's like I can finally breathe again. Sarah leaned in, her expression turning serious. So, what's next for you, Jess? You've got a clean slate now. I thought about it, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. I'm not sure, but I'm excited to find out. Maybe I'll travel, pick up some of the charity work I had to put on hold. As for love, I paused, giving her a rueful smile. I think I'll give that a miss for a while. Just make sure you're doing what makes you happy, okay? You deserve it after all that drama, she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Thanks, Sarah, that's the plan, I replied. Not long after that conversation, my phone started buzzing with calls and messages from Alex. He was pleading, saying he changed, that we could start over. His parents even got in on the act, sending messages filled with apologies and invitations to talk things over. Sitting in my room, phone in hand, I couldn't help but laugh. The sheer audacity was almost admirable. Almost. I typed out a response, one I'd been mulling over for days. Alex, moving on means moving forward, not going back to what broke you. I wish you all the best, but this is where our path ends for good. Take care. Hitting send felt like closing the final chapter of a book I'd been stuck in for too long. And just like that, I was ready to start writing a new one. The next few months were a blur of activity. I threw myself into my work, took up volunteering with a vengeance, and even booked a solo trip to a place I'd always wanted to visit. Life was full, and for the first time in a long while, it was fulfilling too. One evening, sitting on a balcony overlooking a bustling street in a far-off city, I realized I'd found what I'd been searching for all along: peace. The drama, the heartache, the betrayal. It all seemed like a distant memory. My phone buzzed with a new message, but this time it was from a number I didn't recognize. Hesitantly, I opened it. It was from someone I'd met during my travels, someone who'd made me laugh and think in equal measure. "Hey Jessica, how about dinner when you're back? No expectations, just food and good company." I stared at the message, a smile slowly spreading across my face. Maybe it was time to open my heart again, but on my terms and my pace. "Yes, I'd like that," I typed back, hitting send before I could second-guess myself. Looking out at the city lights, I felt a sense of excitement for the future. I had moved on, not just from Alex and his family, but from the person I was when I was with them. I was stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. My name is Evelyn Warner, and everything I thought I knew about my life changed suddenly one Thursday evening. Richard, my husband of 15 years, came home, but he wasn't alone. He had a young woman named Clara with him, holding onto his arm. Clara was only 23, and she looked smug, which felt strange in our home. Without any warning, Richard dropped a bombshell. He wanted a divorce. He said Clara would be living with us now, and he declared that the house belonged to her. His voice was cold, not the warmth I was used to hearing. I couldn't believe what was happening. My heart raced with disbelief and confusion. I had heard of such things, but I never thought I would be experiencing it. I stayed calm, but it was more from shock than anything else. "I can't believe you're serious," I managed to say quietly. Richard laughed, a sound that felt unfamiliar and distant to me now. "I've been thinking about this for a long time. You just didn't see it coming," he said. Clara looked at me with a look of triumph. Richard said he was tired of me, and that Clara understood him better. It felt like I was living in a nightmare. Richard, the man I love and the father of our child, seemed like a stranger. I couldn't believe he was throwing away our marriage and our family for Clara. I felt a bitterness in my voice that I didn't know I had. "So this is it? You're choosing her over us?" I asked, feeling betrayed by his words. Despite the pain, I began to see things clearly. Richard was revealing his true self, and it wasn't pretty. "You're willing to ruin everything for a fling?" I questioned, my voice stronger now. "It's much more than that, Evelyn. Clara is my future, and you're just the past," Richard said dismissively. I looked at Clara, a girl young enough to be our daughter, caught up in what she thought was love. But I saw it differently. It was a midlife crisis, a cruel game. "Fine," I said, the shock turning into determination. "You want a divorce? You'll get it. But remember, Richard, this house is as much mine as it is yours, and I won't give it up without a fight." As they walked past me, I felt a shiver of disgust, not just at the sight of them together, but at my own blindness. But this wasn't the end. It was a beginning of my fight for my dignity, for my child, for what was rightfully mine. In the days that followed, I was consumed by emotions. Memories of our life together were tainted by Richard's betrayal. I couldn't eat or sleep, haunted by images of him with Clara, their laughter echoing in my ears. But amidst the turmoil, a plan formed in my mind. I wouldn't let Richard get away with it. This wasn't just about the house or the marriage. It was about justice. I was going to make him regret his decision, regret ever thinking he could discard me so easily. I sought out the best divorce lawyer in town, someone known for their ruthless efficiency. As I explained my situation to Miss Johnson, her eyes sharpened with determination. "Richard thinks he can just replace you and walk away with everything." "Not on my watch," she said. We went over the legalities, and it became clear that Richard had underestimated me. The house, which he had arrogantly promised to Clara, was partly mine by law. The land it stood on was inherited solely in my name from my father. Richard had no claim to it whatsoever. Armed with this information, I felt a surge of power for the first time since Richard's betrayal. I was going to turn the tables on him, and he wouldn't see it coming. Miss Johnson drafted the divorce papers with precision, ensuring my rights were protected. But it wasn't just about the legal battle, it was personal. Richard had hurt me deeply, and I was going to make him pay. I couldn't wait to see the look on his face when he realized the house he planned to give to his mistress was not his to give. The thought brought a small, satisfied smile to my lips. But this was only the beginning. I was determined to hit Richard where it hurt the most. His ego, his pride, his sense of self. Nothing was off limits. He had started this war, but I was going to finish it. As I signed the divorce papers, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. The life I had known was over, but a new chapter was beginning. In this chapter, I was the author, and Richard was just a cautionary tale in the story of my life. The day I filed the divorce papers marked a turning point. My heart raced with a mix of fear and excitement as I handed over the documents. This was it, the point of no return. But as I left the courthouse, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I was no longer the victim in Richard's cruel game. I was now the protagonist in my own story of justice. Later, I met with Miss Johnson to plan our next move. We sat in her office, the afternoon sun casting long shadows on the floor as we plotted Richard's downfall. "Richard's going to fight dirty, Evelyn. You need to be prepared for that," Miss Johnson warned, her eyes serious. "I know," I replied, steeling myself. "But I have something he doesn't know about. The land this house is on. It's mine, inherited from my father." Miss Johnson's eyes lit up. "That changes everything. He can't claim the house without the land. We can serve him an eviction notice." The idea of Richard and Clara receiving an eviction notice from the home they thought was theirs brought a bitter sense of satisfaction. It was more than just a legal move. It was a statement. I was not going to be discarded and forgotten. "Let's do it," I said firmly. The day the eviction notice was delivered, I imagined the shock and anger on Richard's face. This was just the beginning of his karma. For every tear I shed, for every sleepless night, he would pay. But the battle was far from over. Fueled by his ego, Richard wouldn't go down without a fight. He called me, his voice a mix of disbelief and fury. "Evelyn, what the hell do you think you're doing with this eviction notice?" he barked. "I'm just reclaiming what's mine, Richard. You should have thought twice before deciding to give away something that wasn't yours," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "This is ridiculous. You're doing this to get back at me, aren't you?" he accused. "It's not about revenge, Richard. It's about justice. You can't just take what you want without consequences," I countered. Richard was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. He had underestimated me, thinking I would quietly retreat. But I was fighting back, and I wasn't going to stop until I got what was rightfully mine. "This isn't over, Evelyn. I'll fight this," he finally said. "Go ahead," I responded. "But remember, the law is on my side, and I'm not backing down." After hanging up, I felt a surge of power. For too long, I had let Richard dictate our lives. But now the tables were turned. I was in control, and I would not relent until justice was served. In the weeks that followed, it was a chess game of legal maneuvers and emotional confrontations. Richard, caught off guard by the eviction notice, launched into a series of desperate attempts to sway the situation in his favor. But with each move, he only tangled himself further in his own web. One evening, as I sat in my living room, the phone rang. The caller ID flashed Richard's name, and I braced myself for another round of pleading and anger. "Evelyn, you can't do this to me, to us." Richard's voice came through, tinged with frustration. "Us? There's no us anymore, Richard. You made sure of that," I replied, my voice steady. "This is madness. You're going to leave me homeless over some petty revenge," he argued. "Petty? You call destroying our family petty? I shot back. This isn't about revenge, Richard. It's about consequences. Your actions have them, and now you're facing them. Richard's voice turned softer, almost pleading. Evelyn, please, let's talk about this. We can sort it out for old time's sake. I almost laughed. Old time's sake? As if our years together were mere tokens to be traded in times of trouble. There's nothing left to sort out, Richard. You made your choices, now you live with them. He was silent for a moment, and I could sense his desperation mounting. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Seeing me suffer, he accused. It's not about enjoyment, Richard. It's about justice. You need to understand that every action has a consequence. And this, I paused. This is yours. I hung up before he could respond. My heart was racing, but there was a sense of empowerment in standing my ground. For too long, I had let Richard dictate the terms of our life. But now the balance had shifted. I was no longer the passive wife he thought he could easily discard. In the following days, the reality of his situation seemed to dawn on Richard. His calls became less frequent, his voice less assured. The man who had once held all the power in our relationship was now scrambling to salvage what he could. What little he could salvage from the ruins he had created, Richard scrambled to grasp. Clara's presence in the background of this drama was a constant reminder of the catalyst for all of this. But I knew her part in Richard's story was coming to an end. She was just another pawn in his game, and soon she would realize it too. I lay awake at night, the silence of the house contrasting sharply with the chaos of my thoughts. But amidst the turmoil, there was a growing sense of clarity. I was doing the right thing, not just for me, but for our child. In this battle of wills, I was not just fighting for my rights, I was fighting for our future. As the legal battle intensified, Richard's veneer of control began to crack. The house he had intended to gift Clara was slipping through his fingers, and with it, his imagined future. His desperation became more evident with each passing day. One afternoon, as I reviewed some documents from Miss Johnson, my phone buzzed with a message from Richard. It was an invitation, or rather a plea, for a meeting. Against my better judgment, I agreed. It was time to face him, not as his wife, but as the architect of his downfall. We met at a quiet cafe, a neutral ground amidst our war. Richard looked haggard, the strain of the situation etching deep lines on his face. As he saw me, his expression shifted from relief to something darker. Evelyn, thank you for coming. We need to sort this out, he started, his voice shaky. Sort this out? You mean find a way for you to weasel out of the consequences? I replied coldly. He leaned forward, his eyes searching mine. I know I've made mistakes, but this is too much. You're taking everything from me, everything. No, Richard, I'm taking back what's mine. You made your choice when you decided to betray our family. Now I'm making mine, I said firmly. Richard's frustration boiled over. You're heartless. Do you enjoy seeing me like this, struggling, begging? I met his gaze unflinching. Heartless? You dare call me heartless after what you've done? This isn't about enjoyment, Richard. It's about justice. You can beg all you want, but it changes nothing. He slumped back in his chair, defeated. So what? You're going to leave me homeless, ruin me. If that's what it takes for you to understand the gravity of your actions, then yes, I said. You thought you could discard me without any repercussions. You were wrong. Richard looked away, the reality of his situation finally dawning on him. What about Clara? He asked, almost as an afterthought. Clara? She's your concern, not mine. Though I doubt she'll stick around once she realizes there's nothing left for her. Here, I replied as I stood up to leave. Richard reached out in a last-ditch effort to salvage something from the wreckage. Evelyn, please, he pleaded. I pulled away. Save your pleas, Richard. It's too late for that. You've made your bed, now you lie in it. Walking away from that cafe, I felt a surge of liberation. The chains of our marriage, once so constrictive, were now broken. I was free from Richard's betrayal, free to rebuild my life on my terms. In the wake of our meeting, Richard's attempts to sway the situation became increasingly frantic and futile. His calls, once demanding and arrogant, were now laced with desperation. The tables had turned, and he was slowly coming to terms with the magnitude of his mistakes. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone rang. The familiar jingle brought an involuntary sigh. It was Richard again. Bracing myself, I answered. "Evelyn, you can't do this. We can talk about this. There has to be another way," Richard pleaded, his voice cracking. "Another way? After everything you've done, you think there's a way out for you?" I responded, my voice laced with incredulity. "It's not just about me. Think about our child, Evelyn. This affects them too," he argued, playing what he thought was his trump card. "Our child. The same child you so easily dismissed in your plans with Clara. No, Richard. This is about justice. This is about making sure our child knows that actions have consequences," I retorted. There was a pause on the other end, a silence filled with unspoken realizations. Richard had always underestimated me, but no longer. I was no longer the woman he thought he could control and manipulate. "You're going to regret this, Evelyn. You're pushing me too far," Richard said, his voice a mixture of anger and fear. "Regret? The only regret I have is not seeing your true colors sooner. You're not being pushed too far, you're just finally being held accountable," I shot back. Richard's frustration boiled over. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you can just take everything and leave me with nothing." "This isn't about winning or losing, Richard. It's about righting a wrong. You made your choices, and now you live with the consequences. It's that simple," I replied firmly. The call ended with Richard's defeated silence, a stark contrast to his usual bluster. He was finally feeling the weight of his actions, the cost of his betrayal. In the following weeks, the reality of Richard's situation became increasingly apparent. His financial resources dwindled, strained by legal fees and the loss of the house. Clara, ever the opportunist, began to distance herself, her affection waning as Richard's fortunes declined. The final court hearing was a formality, a legal stamp on what was already a foregone conclusion. As I stood outside the courthouse, the decree in hand, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. Richard's downfall was complete, a direct result of his own actions. He had sown the seeds of his destruction, and I had merely ensured they grew. I turned my back on the courthouse, my heart lighter than it had been in months. The future lay ahead, undefined, but promising. I have fought for justice for myself and my child and emerged victorious. The months following the divorce and Richard's eviction from the house brought profound changes. Our home, once tainted by the shadow of betrayal, slowly transformed back into a sanctuary of peace and strength for me and our child. Each room was cleansed of Richard's presence, his memories replaced by new joyful ones. Richard's downfall continued in a downward spiral. Without the house and struggling financially, he was forced to move back in with his parents. The last I heard, Clara had left him, her affections as transient as the wealth she had hoped to secure. As I tended to the garden, a task that had become a source of solace, my phone rang. The screen flashed Richard's name, a reminder of a chapter I had firmly closed. "Curiosity piqued," I answered. "Evelyn, it's Richard." His voice came through subdued and almost unrecognizable. "What do you want, Richard?" I asked, my tone indifferent. I wanted to apologize for everything," he said, the words seemingly difficult for him to utter. "Apologies don't change the past, Richard. They don't undo the hurt," I replied calmly. "I know," he admitted. "I've lost everything, Evelyn. Clara's gone. I'm living with my parents. I've hit rock bottom." "That was your doing, Richard. You made those choices," I stated plainly. There was a heavy sigh on the other end. "I know. I thought you should know. I regret it, Evelyn. I regret it all." His words laden with remorse. But his words didn't bring me the satisfaction I had once thought they would. Instead, there was a sense of finality, a closing of a chapter that had caused so much pain. "Your regret is your own to live with, Richard. I've moved on. I suggest you do the same, I said, ready to end the conversation. Evelyn, he started, but trailed off. There's nothing more to say, Richard. Goodbye, I said, and hung up. As I put my phone away and turned back to my garden, a sense of peace washed over me. The past was behind me, and ahead was a life filled with possibilities, a life of my own making. The garden bloomed around me, a testament to new beginnings and growth. Our child laughed in the background, a sound that filled my heart with joy. This was my world now, one where betrayal and pain had no place. Richard's chapter in my life was over, but mine was just beginning. A chapter filled with strength, resilience, and the love of those who truly mattered. Guess what? I was shocked when John suddenly said he wanted a divorce while we were getting ready for a funeral. He said he wanted to marry someone who didn't want kids, so he didn't want to keep paying for our child, Charlie. I felt relieved that I wouldn't have to deal with child-rearing expenses anymore, but also upset that this man was Charlie's father. We agreed to the divorce, and John left on the day of the funeral. Later, I found out that John was scared when he saw Charlie's will because it was time for me to stand up for myself. Let me tell you a bit about me. I'm Natasha, a 42-year-old housewife. I used to work in a company as a translator, but now I work freelance. My husband John is 45, 3 years older than me. We got married when I was 29, and we had our son Charlie the following year. Unfortunately, John wasn't very involved in raising Charlie, who was often sick. When Charlie got really sick at 12, I tried calling John, but he didn't pick up. Maybe he was at a business meeting. So, instead of calling John, I decided to message him. His response came the next morning, and I immediately called him. This time, he picked up right away, but he seemed annoyed. I urged him to come to the hospital because Charlie was really sick, but John brushed it off, saying his presence wouldn't make a difference and worried about the hospital bills. He hung up abruptly, leaving me feeling angry and frustrated. As time passed, Charlie's condition didn't improve despite the change in seasons. Doctors even doubted he'd make it through winter. I reduced my work hours to spend more time with him. Charlie noticed my absence from work and expressed concern, but I assured him everything was fine. To ease his worries, I started working from the hospital room, right beside him. Charlie loved reading and studying, so I tried to make his environment as comfortable as possible. However, John never visited Charlie, nor did he show any concern. He only complained about the expenses and criticized my decisions, leaving Charlie feeling alone and neglected. I realized that pushing John to visit Charlie wouldn't make a difference, so I didn't insist. By then, John often came home late, smelling of alcohol. He said it was because of work, but evidence suggested he was having an affair. Despite his neglect, I hesitated to divorce him because I worried it would upset Charlie. Meanwhile, Charlie's health kept deteriorating. When his doctor told me he only had about a month left to live, I was devastated. Despite continuing treatment for another 2 weeks, Charlie's condition worsened. When the doctor said there was no more treatment to try, I decided to take Charlie home for his final days. Charlie was happy about going home, but John seemed indifferent. It was clear to me that John was beyond redemption, and I had lost all hope in him. Charlie was scheduled to be discharged the next evening. As I busied myself with packing Charlie's things and getting ready to bring him home, he suddenly asked me, "Mom, do you love Dad?" His question caught me off guard. But before I could respond, he continued, "Dad doesn't seem interested in me or you. So if you don't love Dad, I want you to divorce and live your life." I could tell Charlie had picked up on the tension between John and me. But as a parent, I couldn't let him worry about our problems. So I quickly reassured him with a smile, telling him that I loved his dad and that he cared about us too, even though he was busy. Charlie didn't seem entirely convinced, but he dropped the subject and fell asleep. 2 days later, he passed away at home. John never showed up, but I stayed by Charlie's side, holding his hand and grieving. After Charlie's passing, the doctor and nurse, who had been with us since Charlie was young, came to mourn with us. They handed me a letter from Charlie's bag, saying he wanted me to have it if anything happened. In the letter, Charlie expressed his gratitude to the doctor and nurse for their care. I found myself alone without John's help while Charlie was suffering from his illness. I felt grateful to those who supported us during this tough time. After they left, I opened the letter Charlie had left beside him. Its contents surprised me and made me cry. Alongside Charlie's gratitude, the letter contained something shocking that angered me deeply. Despite my turmoil, I had to focus on planning Charlie's funeral. I decided on a small, homey service, but John, who had been absent for so long, finally showed up the day before the funeral, reeking of alcohol. His nonchalant attitude and comments about how I aged only added to my frustration. He seemed disconnected from the reality of Charlie's passing, treating it like a distant event. Arguing with John felt pointless, so I chose to focus on the funeral arrangements. Despite the pain of losing Charlie, there was a strange sense of relief knowing I wouldn't have to worry about child-rearing expenses anymore. However, John's sudden mention of divorce during the funeral preparations left me utterly shocked, highlighting his selfishness once again. But this was too much to bear. John's words hit me like a ton of bricks. There's a woman I want to marry, but she doesn't want kids. So with Charlie alive, the child support and medical expenses would drain my money. His callousness cut deep, and a wave of relief swept over him at the thought of being free from financial burdens. The realization that such a man was Charlie's father sent a chill down my spine. As my head cleared, anger boiled inside me. I agreed to the divorce immediately. Fine, I said. Then I'll take the house. Get out as soon as you can. Just wait until after the funeral. With that, John left on the day of the funeral. At the funeral, as I read Charlie's will, John's face turned pale. Relatives glared at him with fierce faces. It was my turn to strike back. Charlie's will expose John's affair. Until I read the will at the funeral, John had been pretending to be a grieving father, crying loudly. How could such a letter exist? It's not true, right, Natasha? John tried to deny it, appearing pathetic. I silently took out an envelope from my bag and thrust photos in front of him. He stumbled over his words, his face still pale. I smiled sweetly and asked the relatives to pass around a few photos I had. Whispers of disgust and small cries of shock arose from all around. Despicable. Not visiting his frail son, but with this woman in such a scandalous manner. The glares at John intensified, and he slumped down in his seat. I then presented John with the divorce papers. He looked up at me in shock, his voice cracking as if he was about to cry. You didn't pay attention to me because you were always nursing him. It was just a fling. Forgive me. I don't want a divorce, John pleaded. Not paying attention. You're not a child. I repeatedly asked you to help me nurse him, but you always ran away, claiming work as an excuse. As soon as John said that nursing was dirty, he disappeared from my view. When I looked down, he was crawling on the floor, with my father-in-law standing over him, breathing heavily. You. What do you mean nursing your own son is dirty? Enough with the jokes. A parent who doesn't care for their child isn't a parent at all. You're the lowest of the low. My in-laws had always adored Charlie. They celebrated every time he was discharged from the hospital, bought him his favorite things, and never missed a visit. They had been covering for John, believing his excuses about being busy at work, never imagining their own son could be such a disgrace. Tears streaked their faces as they glared at John, who sat in disbelief, clutching his cheek where he'd been struck. Natasha, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. If we knew he was such a man, we would have encouraged you to divorce him sooner. We are truly sorry. My in-laws began to bow deeply, but I hurried to lift them up. It wasn't their fault. Charlie loved his grandparents, and their presence was one reason I hadn't divorced John. You guys are not to blame. Look, Charlie's letter says thank you and stay healthy. Charlie and I both love you very much. I reassured them. My mother-in-law hugged me, sobbing quietly, and my father-in-law was also crying, apologizing to me. John finally came to his senses, stood up, and pointed at me, yelling, "Don't be ridiculous. She's just an old lady who couldn't even take care of her husband, a failure of a wife. As my father-in-law lunged towards John, I stepped in front of him. John looked at me with a fearful yet defiant glare. What, you got something to say? Not really. This is reality. No one here is on your side. And make sure to pay back the money you've borrowed from many people, haven't you? I said. After reading Charlie's letter, I had contacted the relatives John had borrowed money from. They began murmuring, realizing John's expensive activities involving a woman from a nightclub, realizing that John couldn't afford his lavish lifestyle on his salary alone. I checked if anyone had lent him money. To my surprise, it wasn't just John's relatives but mine as well. Under the pretense of Charlie's medical expenses, John had borrowed money, but it was clear he had used it for his affair. I lent that money thinking it was for Charlie. Give me back my $20,000 right now. One relative demanded. Same here. I want my $40,000 back, another exclaimed. This sparked a cascade of demands from various relatives for the money John had borrowed. John's face turned paler with each claim, and he turned to me, weakly smiling. Natasha, we're a couple, right? You'll help me, won't you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you serious? You didn't help with nursing, didn't contribute to the medical expenses, or even the living expenses. Instead, you borrowed from everyone for your own selfish needs. Unbelievable. Why would I help you? With a pathetic voice, John slumped back down, seemingly out of energy to retort. I looked down at him, ready to deliver the final blow, and called to the entrance, Cheryl, please come in. John's face turned into sheer panic as he stared at the entrance. Cheryl, the woman from the photos, walked towards me hesitantly. She looked plain, with light makeup, a stark contrast to the woman in the photos. I invited her on Charlie's last day. She was with you, right? I thought it would be a nice gesture if Cheryl could attend the funeral. But when she arrived, I didn't mince words. I'm sorry about this. Save it. No need for such superficial words, I told her firmly. Cheryl's face turned as pale as John's as I handed her some documents. I called you here today to sign these. Please read them carefully and sign. $100,000? I can't pay that. It's impossible, Cheryl exclaimed. It's not for you to decide whether you can pay or not. I replied sternly, refusing to let her off easily. John, trembling, stood between Cheryl and me, pleading for forgiveness on her behalf. It's my fault, so please forgive Cheryl. Demanding $100,000 from her is just too cruel, he said. Why should I? I'm merely asking for compensation for the affair, I retorted, waiting for John's next words. That's because Cheryl is fragile, unlike you. How do you expect her to earn $100,000? How cruel can you be, John? John raised his eyebrows and sighed heavily. Cheryl clung to John's back, and they seemed lost in each other. The cold stares weren't only from me. The relatives were ready to give them a piece of their mind. But I decided to add fuel to the fire. Cheryl, your son is hospitalized, right? Son? Cheryl flinched at my words. He's 12, just like Charlie was always in the hospital. Your ex-husband took custody, right? Tough with all the hospital and treatment costs, not to mention the bed fees. You must be getting quite a demand for child support, aren't you? How? How do you know that? Cheryl looked at me as if she'd seen a ghost. John was frozen in shock. I pulled out some documents from my bag and handed them to John. He shakily read them, then suddenly pushed Cheryl away. Hey, what's this? Divorced with a kid? You never told me. Didn't you say the money was for your family living far away? John accused. I didn't lie. My son is my family. So I've been with a used woman. Where's the true love you promised? Cheryl responded, her voice breaking. After Cheryl threw her shoe at John and he lunged at her, they started brawling like children. Fortunately, a security guard intervened. I approached the disheveled pair with a smile. John, please sign the divorce papers and arrange for the alimony. Cheryl, I won't reduce your compensation by a single cent. And your ex-husband said something about your affairs being a sickness that can't be cured. Seems like you have a few partners, so with that kind of leeway, expect enforced payments for the child support, treatment costs, and alimony. That's impossible. John hung his head, speechless, and Cheryl was led away by security, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I apologized to each relative for the disturbance, and they comforted me, bringing me to tears. After that, my divorce from John was finalized, and we also agreed on the amount of alimony he had to pay, just as I had requested. This incident infuriated his parents tremendously. Moreover, the extended family was outraged to discover they had been deceived too, giving him the cold shoulder. Of course, he was asked to return the money he embezzled, and it seems like he borrowed it from some shady sources. To repay the debt, he's been working multiple jobs, but the repayment is so huge that he's rumored to have nothing left for living expenses. Eventually, unable to keep up with the ballooning interest, last month he was taken away by some intimidating guys. His parents don't even intend to file a missing person report. So while I hope he's safe, I can't help but wish he suffers unimaginable pain. As for Cheryl, all the men she dated found out about her affairs and the child she had, cutting off all financial support. At 30, she's considered old for her line of work, struggling to attract clients, and eventually had to turn to her parents. She paid the alimony in one lump sum. However, she's since been sent to work on a farm on some island with her wages going directly to her parents for debt repayment. As for me, I moved with Charlie's memorial tablet. I bought a house near the ocean, something Charlie always wanted, and now live there alone with the cat he wished for. I look forward to the times when my in-laws visit, and we reminisce about Charlie. Another letter from Charlie arrived for me. In it, he wrote in slightly blurred script about his gratitude, apologies for leaving for heaven first, and his wish to be my child again in another life. The letter ended with, "Mom, stay true to yourself, stay healthy, and live a long life," inspiring me to live my life for Charlie. Despite the sadness of not seeing my beloved child grow up, I'm living each day to the fullest. Hi, I'm Anna. I've been with Rob for a long time. We met in college, got married soon after, and have been together for 15 years. Life with Rob was mostly peaceful. We lived in a nice house, had good jobs, and liked a lot of the same things. But there was something missing, a child. We tried for a long time to have a baby. We went to doctors, tried different treatments, and even thought about adopting. But nothing worked. As time went on, not being able to have a child started to make us argue more, and our future didn't seem so bright anymore. Then one day, something changed. It was a regular Wednesday morning. I woke up feeling a bit sick. I thought it was something I ate, but then I realized I missed my period. Could it be? I quickly found a pregnancy test in the bathroom and used it. Waiting for the result felt like forever. When I finally looked, it was positive. My heart raced. We were pregnant. I had to tell Rob. He was in the living room, doing some work. I took a deep breath and told him I was pregnant. But his reaction wasn't what I expected. He seemed worried and unsure if it was safe at our age. I felt hurt. I thought he'd be happy. We argued a bit, but I convinced him that we should be happy about it. The next few months were hard. I was often sick, tired, and felt exhausted all the time. But I held on to hope that our baby would bring us closer together and make our future brighter. But every little kick from inside reminded me why it was all worth it. One day, after feeling particularly weak, I collapsed. Thankfully, Rob was home and rushed me to the hospital. As I lay on the cold hospital bed surrounded by beeping machines, I felt more vulnerable than ever before. Is she going to be okay? I heard Rob ask to Dr. Mitchell, his voice full of worry. She needs rest, Dr. Mitchell replied. Her body is under a lot of strain due to the pregnancy. It's important that she stays relaxed and avoids stress. That hospital stay was the first of many. Each time I was admitted, I'd watch Rob from the window, pacing back and forth in the hospital corridor, talking on the phone, sometimes even arguing with the billing department. One evening, as I lay in the hospital bed, Rob walked in with a tired look on his face. I met with Dr. Mitchell, he began. He said we need to consider the possibility of bed rest for the rest of the pregnancy. I nodded slowly. If it's best for the baby, I'll do it. Rob sat down next to me, holding my hand. I'm sorry, Anna. I wish I could do more to help. I squeezed his hand. You're here with me. That's more than enough. However, as the days went by, Rob's visits became less frequent. Sometimes he'd call. Other times he'd send a text saying he was caught up with work, but the distance between us seemed to be growing. During one of my longer hospital stays, feeling particularly low and missing the comfort of home, I asked a nurse if I could use the phone to call Rob. It's been 3 days, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. When he answered, I said, You haven't visited. I know, Anna. It's hard for me seeing you like this, he admitted. Rob, I need you now more than ever, I said. Silence. I'll try to come by tomorrow, he finally said, his voice distant. But tomorrow turned into the day after, and soon a week had passed. Feeling isolated and alone, I confided in my nurse, Lisa. He's probably just scared, she suggested, trying to be comforting. Sometimes when people can't handle situations, they distance themselves. One morning, after a particularly difficult night, Dr. Mitchell came into my room. I think it's time we discuss the birth plan, Anna, he began cautiously. There are some decisions to be made. Rob, despite his absences, was there for that discussion. We sat hand in hand, listening to our options, praying for the strength to make the right choices. Days turned into weeks, and as the due date approached, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. But I held on to hope, believing that once our child arrived, everything would fall into place. Little did I know, the hardest part of our journey was yet to come. The first moments of holding my daughter, Emma, in my arms were moments of pure bliss. Her tiny fingers, her soft cooing sounds, it felt like a dream. But that dream was quickly shattered by Dr. Mitchell's grim announcement. Anna, Rob. He began with a heavy sigh. There are some concerns regarding Emma's health. We've observed some abnormalities that suggest she might have a severe condition. Rob's face turned pale. What are you talking about? He asked, alarmed. We'll need to run more tests to be certain, but it's important you're both prepared, Dr. Mitchell replied, his voice gentle but firm. That evening, as I cradled Emma, Rob walked into the room, a storm brewing in his eyes. He looked at me, then at Emma, and took a deep breath. Anna, he started, his voice shaking. How could you give birth at this age? We knew the risks. Tears welled up in my eyes. Rob, I thought we wanted this. I thought we wanted a family, I said, almost pleadingly. He was nearly shouting now. You should have considered an abortion. Why bring a child into the world with so many complications because of your selfishness? We now have a possibly sick child to look after, he accused. I was shocked. Rob, she's our daughter. We should be together in this, not pointing fingers, I said, trying to reason with him. But his face was red with anger. I can't believe I'm in this situation. I can't raise a child with potential disabilities. It's not the life I imagined, he said bitterly. As the weight of his words sank in, a cold dread filled my heart. So what are you saying? I asked, my voice trembling. Rob hesitated for a moment. I don't think I can do this. I can't be here, not like this, he finally said, looking away. It felt like the floor had been pulled from beneath me. You're abandoning your daughter because she might be different, I whispered, devastated. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I just can't handle it, he muttered. Devastation turned into determination. Fine, if you're leaving, then leave for good. But you'll have no claim over Emma, I declared, my voice shaking with emotion. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked away, leaving me with our newborn daughter, grappling with the uncertainty of our future. The first few weeks after Rob left were the hardest. The house felt empty, but the silence was deafening, and the reality of being a single mother weighed heavily on me. But every time I looked into Emma's big, innocent eyes, I felt a surge of determination. I was going to make sure she had the best life possible, no matter what it took. My sister, Linda, was a godsend during this time. She came over often, helping with household chores and looking after Emma so I could rest. One evening, as I was feeding Emma, Linda walked in, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "Anna," she began gently, "you need to think about the future. Have you considered finding a place of your own?" I sighed, looking around the home that held so many memories. "I've thought about it, but the thought of leaving this place, it's just hard." Linda took my hand. "I know, but think about Emma. This house will always remind you of Rob and everything that happened. You both deserve a fresh start." She was right. I needed to let go of the past and focus on building a new life for Emma and me. The search for a new place wasn't easy. With my limited savings and no job, options were limited. But then one day, Linda called me excitedly. "Anna, you won't believe what I found. There's a small house for rent in my neighborhood. It's perfect for you and Emma." I went to see the house the very next day. It was a cozy 2-bedroom place with a small garden in the back. The landlord, Mrs. Peterson, was a kind elderly lady who lived next door. "Linda speaks very highly of you," Mrs. Peterson said, smiling warmly. "The place is yours if you want it." I felt tears of gratitude welling up. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. This means so much to me." Moving in was hectic, but with Linda's help, we managed. As I set up Emma's room, filling it with toys and her tiny clothes, a sense of peace washed over me. This was our home, our sanctuary. Linda popped her head into the room. "How's it going in here?" I smiled, hugging Emma close. "It's perfect. I can't thank you enough." She hugged us both. "That's what family is for." "You're not alone in this, Anna. Remember that." Days turned into weeks, and life began to settle into a new routine. Morning walks with Emma, visits to the local park, and coffee dates with Linda became our new normal. One day, as Emma and I were playing in the garden, Mrs. Peterson walked over holding a tray of freshly baked cookies. "Thought you two could use a treat," she said, smiling. I smiled back, taking a cookie. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. It's delicious." She chuckled. "Call me Ellie. Feels strange being called Mrs. Peterson by my new neighbor." We chatted as Emma giggled and played. Ellie shared stories of her own children, offering advice and wisdom. I felt the connection, a sense of community that had been missing for so long. As the days went by, the pain of the past began to fade. With the support of my sister and new friends like Ellie, I realized that while one chapter of my life had closed, another even more beautiful one was just beginning. Emma's first birthday was just around the corner, and I was deep in preparations. Ellie and Linda offered their assistance, suggesting ideas for decorations and games. As the day drew nearer, I found myself reflecting on the whirlwind of the past year. My baby girl, Emma, was blossoming into a bubbly, inquisitive child, her laughter a constant source of joy. One afternoon, as I was laying Emma down for her nap, the phone rang. The sound was sharp and unexpected. "Hello?" came the familiar voice. It was Dr. Mitchell. I felt a twinge of anxiety. "Dr. Mitchell, is there a problem?" He hesitated, which only deepened my concern. "Anna, I need you to come to the hospital. There's something about Emma we need to discuss." I felt my heart in my throat. "Is she okay?" His voice was thick with regret. "Please come in. We need to talk face to face." Linda agreed to watch Emma while I rushed to the hospital. The drive felt much longer than it was, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Dr. Mitchell greeted me in his office, his usually calm face lined with worry. "Anna, I'm so sorry to call you in this way. My patience was thinning. What's going on?" Taking a deep breath, he began, "There's been a grave error. The initial test we ran on Emma after her birth got mixed up with another baby's." My confusion grew. "Meaning?" He met my gaze, his eyes filled with regret. "Emma is healthy, Anna. She doesn't have any medical condition. I can't express how deeply sorry I am." The weight of his words hit me hard. "You mean to tell me I've lived this past year under false assumptions? My life turned upside down because of this." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, and it's my responsibility. I can't begin to fathom the pain this has caused." I thought of Rob, of the bitterness and the pain this mistake had caused. "It's shattered my life," I said. Dr. Mitchell looked defeated. "I know words can't change the past, but I'll do everything I can to make it right." I took a moment to collect my thoughts. I need time to process this. Driving home, a mix of relief and fury consumed me. Yet seeing Emma's joyful face as I walked in grounded me. She was my world, and she was okay. That night, Linda and I sat down, and I relayed everything. She was horrified. "Hannah, what are you going to do?" I looked at Emma, peacefully sleeping. "For now, nothing. And I don't want Rob to know. He made his choice." Linda squeezed my hand. "You're strong, Anna. Remember, you're not alone in this." In the stillness of the night, I reflected on our journey. Yes, the revelation about Emma's health was bittersweet, but one thing was for sure. I would protect and cherish her regardless of the past. The swift passage of time amazed me. Before I knew it, Emma was already 5 and gearing up for her first day of school. My feelings were a whirlwind of pride, hope, and the natural apprehension of a mother. At breakfast a few days before school, Emma gazed at me, her eyes shimmering with anticipation. "Mom, will I be going to school like other kids?" I smiled warmly. "Yes, sweetie. In just a few days, you'll be starting." Her face lit up. "Will I find friends there? Will they like me?" Touched by her innocence, I assured her, "Emma, you're such a lovely girl. Of course they'll adore you." On her first day, dressed in her new school uniform with a pink backpack hanging from her shoulders, Emma paused at the school gates with a quiver in her voice. She admitted, "Mommy, I'm scared. No one will talk to me." I crouched to her eye level. "Honey, always remember to be yourself. You're amazing, and they'll see that. Just give it some time." Her small hand waved goodbye as she joined the bustling crowd of students. I watched her until she was out of sight, my heart heavy with the typical worries of a parent. A few weeks later, Emma was all excitement and stories about her new friend, Sophia. Their adventures during breaks, their shared love for painting, and their little secrets. One day, she bounced home, asking, "Mom, can Sophia come over tomorrow?" Delighted at her blossoming friendship, I agreed. "Absolutely. I'm eager to meet your new buddy." The next afternoon was filled with their giggles and playful shouts. From the corner of my eye, I noticed their genuine bond, and I thought of how childhood friendships were so pure and uncomplicated. As the sun dipped, a car pulled up. Emma, holding Sophia's hand, led her to the door. To my shock, standing there were Rob and a young woman, presumably his new wife. Emma, inside now. Rob's voice was curt. Sophia, sensing the tension, looked worriedly between her parents and me. "Daddy, I had so much fun." "Emma's my best friend," she said. Rob's gaze was cold. "Sophia, we've talked about this. You shouldn't play with inferior children," his voice dripping with disdain, making it clear whom he referred to. I felt a rush of anger. Before I could retort, the young woman, probably trying to mediate, gently tugged at Sophia's hand. "Come, dear, let's go home." Emma stood close to me, her eyes filled with confusion and hurt as the car drove away. She whispered, "Mom, why did he say that?" Holding her close, I replied, "Sometimes, sweetie, people don't say the nicest things. But always remember, you're wonderful just the way you are." That evening, as I tucked Emma in, I promised myself that no matter what, I'd always protect her from the cruel judgments of the world. Only days after the incident, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A woman's voice, soft yet firm, responded, "Hi, this is Emily, Sophia's mother. Can we talk?" Surprised, I replied cautiously, "Of course. What's on your mind?" She hesitated. "I'd rather discuss this face to face. Can we meet tomorrow? There's a cafe around the corner from your house." After a moment, I agreed. "All right. See you at 10 a.m. The next morning, I saw Emily waiting. She looked out of place, her pristine appearance contrasting with the laid-back vibe of the cafe. As I approached, she stood up, offering a polite if slightly forced smile. "Thank you for coming," she began, her eyes searching mine. "After the other day, I couldn't shake off a nagging feeling that there's more to the story than Rob's told me. I took a deep breath. I'm not one to spread tales, but since Sophia is involved, I think you should know. Over the next hour, I unfolded our past, how Rob and I have struggled with fertility, my unexpected pregnancy, his disinterest, the misdiagnosis, his leaving, and my subsequent journey with Emma. I made sure to be factual, not letting emotion color the narrative. Emily sat stunned. He never told me any of this. He said you were the one who left him, and he always painted such a rosy picture of your marriage. I shrugged. Sometimes people craft stories to cope or to hide. She looked defeated. I feel like such a fool. I thought our love was genuine, but now it seems like he was just replacing one life with another. Emily, I started, my tone firm. It's not about him anymore. It's about Sophia and Emma. They formed a bond. I don't want Emma to suffer because of our past. She nodded. I completely agree. Children shouldn't be dragged into adult disputes. As we parted, I felt the weight lifted. For the first time, I felt like I was truly free from Rob's shadow. Having laid our past bare, that evening as Emma played with her toys, she looked up. Mom, will I see Sophia again? Smiling, I said, yes, sweetie, you will. And always remember, your past doesn't define your future. You do. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, startling me from my thoughts. Rob's name flashed on the screen, a name I hadn't expected to see in a long time. Hesitating for only a moment, I answered, Anna. Rob's voice was filled with a mix of anger and desperation. Do you have any idea what you've done? I frowned, taken aback. What are you talking about? He spat out bitterly. Emily left me. She filed for divorce, and she's taken everything. I've lost almost everything, Anna, and it's all because she spoke to you. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Rob, you made your choices. I just told her the truth. There was a heavy pause. She also told me about Emma, that she's healthy. You never told me. Why would I, after everything you said, after everything you did? You didn't deserve to know, I retorted. Rob's voice grew softer, almost pleading. Anna, I made a mistake. I realize that now. I want to be there for Emma. I want to be there for you. We can be a family again. I scoffed in disbelief. Now that your life's in shambles, you suddenly want us back? You're unbelievable, Rob. Anna, I know I messed up, but I've changed. Please, give me a chance. I could feel anger rising in me. You walked out on us, Rob. You called our daughter inferior and turned your back. Now that your little fairy tale with Emily has ended, you think you can just waltz back into our lives. Think again. He sounded desperate. Anna, I was wrong. I see that now. Can't you give me another chance? No, I replied firmly. Emma and I have moved on. We're doing just fine without you, and we don't need or want you in our lives. But Anna? He started, but I ended the call. My heart was racing. I took a deep breath, letting the emotions wash over me. Emma and I had each other, and that was all that mattered. I wouldn't let Rob's selfishness disrupt our peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we faced them together.